We're going to call the November 12th, 2015 Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Board members present, Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattapan District, Mr. Jeff Black, representing the Western Caroline District, Mr. Reginald Underwood, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Wayne Akers, representing the Madison District, Mr. Jeff Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, and I'm Calvin Taylor, and I represent the Port Royal District. We will now ask Mr. Seeley if he will lead us in invocation at this time.
Can we all please stand? Heavenly Father, as we gather this evening to do county business, please watch over all those in the county and those that are involved and have helped with the county for so long. Please watch over the men and women in uniform overseas, and please guide everybody to a safe return to their homes and to their loved ones. In your name we pray, amen. I would also like to stand for a moment of silence for Mary Anderson, the school board member who passed away just a few weeks ago. Thank you. Can we all turn for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I understand there was at least one amendment to the agenda. Mr. Colley?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Due to an unforeseen scheduling conflict, Delegate Orrick could not attend tonight, and we would like to put Mr. Whiteman on to give us an update on the school construction projects.
Okay, unless there is an objection, then the agenda will stand amended as requested. That takes us to opening board comments. Mr. Thomas, do you have any at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As a matter of fact, I do have a couple of quick comments. One is I'm sure the board saw the Richmond newscast that said the city of Richmond spent over $1 million on the RCI bike race, at least, and they haven't necessarily gotten their money. So I want to commend the board and the staff of getting the county share of the money up front to make sure we weren't behind the eight ball there. And I wanted to thank Chief Loftus and Kevin Whiteman. I didn't know all of the people, Chief, that you had at the high school polling place, but they all worked together. As I said before, we had construction at the high school. They worked together to put lights up, arranged to have golf carts to bring people from the far ends of the parking lot to the polling place. They did a great job. I really appreciate it. And one last thing, I know it's 2 days late, but I want to say happy birthday to my favorite Marine and the rest of the Marine Corps. So we do appreciate it. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black?
Yes, I have several actually. The first, obviously, I want to thank Mr. Seeley for the moment of silence for Dr. Anderson. That was obviously very, very difficult for the Lake Landor community. She meant a lot to the community, and she also meant a lot to the Western Caroline District. And I was very proud to have her as a friend. The second thing is I want to obviously commend John Copeland on taking over. I wish him the best of luck, and I look forward to actually working with him in the future when it comes to Board of Supervisors, School Board Relations. The other thing, if we could, if all of you could, just keep in your prayers. Obviously, in my district, on Ladysmith Road, we had the two boys that were killed in the accident. They went to actually Spotsylvania High School where I teach, and that accident happened right outside Lake Landor, so that was pretty tragic for the Spotsylvania community. So just keep that family and the mother in your prayers. That's really tough news. Pastor Tillebaugh was the pastor at that service up at Spotswood Baptist Church, and he did a phenomenal job. He did an absolutely phenomenal job, and as far as his eulogy for the two boys. So. Finally, a couple more. I want to thank the voters of Western Caroline for their, obviously last week coming up to the polls. So it's nice to see everyone. So I appreciate that. The History Club at Caroline Middle, they had their veteran ceremony yesterday. This is the third year they did it. That memorial garden is absolutely phenomenal. The roses in the garden are absolutely beautiful, and it's an unbelievable ceremony that they do every year. So I do want to thank them for their efforts. It really kind of puts Caroline in an unbelievably positive light. Finally, I've just got a question. I see on the agenda that we have appointments, and I was kind of curious, due to the situation, why appointments would be on the agenda at this point. Can someone answer that question?
I would be glad to answer it. The appointments come due at the time that the old appointment or the old person in that position leaves, or when their time of service is up. And in these cases, these two appointments are due, because the persons now serving in those appointments, their time of service ended, I believe, in November.
Right. And I guess my concern is we've had many appointments over the years that we have deferred for months and months at a time. And I just feel in light of circumstances with new board members coming in, it would only be fair to them to allow them to pick or have their own appointments.
They will get their own appointment when the time comes. If they come in...
Mr. Chairman, with that, I would like to make a motion that we defer the appointments, all appointments from here on out until January 1st.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we defer appointments until January 2nd. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Nay. Mr. Thomas, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Nay.
Mr. Akers?
Nay.
Mr. Seeley?
Aye.
And I vote nay as well. Okay, moving along, that takes, are you through, sir? Did you have any more?
I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood?
Mr. Chairman, only two comments. Again, I want to also congratulate John Copeland on his election. Secondly, thank the voters as well of Reedy Church District for turning out in large numbers, and hopefully we can continue to satisfy those voters and continue to do the work that they feel helps to meet the needs of Reedy Church community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, please, thank you. I would like to say to the voters of the Madison District, I appreciate the ones that came out and voted on Tuesday. I'd also like to say thank you for allowing me the privilege and the honor of serving them for 28 years. It has been a good 28 years. I think the county has been successful during those 28 years. There have been some disagreements, no question, but I will say that past boards, we were able to resolve our differences in a amenable way, and we didn't take it personally. So I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I'd like to thank the voters of the Madison District for what they've done for me over the past. We weren't successful this year, but hey, life moves on, and that's the democratic way, and that's what I enjoy living in this great United States about, is the fact that you have a choice, and you make that choice, and we move on from it. And I'm just thankful to have been part of that choice, and on the affirmative side for 7 elections. And so I'm very thankful for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Chairman, I would first like to thank the VFW for the wonderful Veterans Day ceremony they did on the courthouse lawn. It's a tradition. It wasn't even advertised. We had around 60 people come. I think that speaks volumes for the folks that want to pay a respect to all of those that have served. I'd also like to thank Bowling Green Elementary for hosting the veterans. They did lunch that day, and the JROTC Color Guard came. Colonel Meyer and a number of relatives and other soldiers were at Bowling Green Elementary. I think the children at the elementary school really enjoyed seeing them. For those that haven't been, they all got out napkins and wanted everybody's autograph that was there in uniform. They were running table to table. It was quite something to see. Always grateful to see that. And then yesterday afternoon, after the 38th parallel, I was able to go over and watch one of the technology clubs The middle school has 3 or 5 3D printers. They've just gotten them, and they're starting to bring them up online. And the projects they're talking about doing for the school system are absolutely phenomenal. I would encourage anybody that has an opportunity to see some of that to take a look. They are really doing an outstanding job at the middle school. It was beyond anybody's wildest dream. Lastly, I would just like to say that I'm really disappointed in the board not allowing new board members to appoint planning commission members. With the way the election results went, I think the new members deserve to have the ability to pick somebody to work with them on the planning commission. Being new, it's really important to have good communication with a planning commission member that you have chosen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Seeley. I would just like to, first of all, say thank you to the citizens of the Port Royal District and Caroline County. I've had the privilege of serving for 20 years, and I have enjoyed it. It's been good, it's been trying, and it's been a few other words at different times, but all in all, the good far outweighs the bad. And so I really enjoyed doing what I did, and I feel as though with the help of this board, we've made some good accomplishments. And I just would like to again thank the board for all their support, as well as the citizens. And while I'm on that, Ms. Nancy Long is here. She is the new supervisor, January 1, Ms. Long. Congratulations. And certainly, as I have said to you in the past, if I can be of service to you in your transition, you have only to ask. One good thing about America is that we as people decide who we want our leaders to be. And when the people speak, we listen. And we go ahead and we do what's necessary to make this county the great county that it is. That's why this country is so great, and I'm sure it will continue to be. And just as a sidebar, I am making the appointment for the Planning Commission, but I have talked that appointment over with Mrs. Long, and we both agree that that person is a good person for that position. Just for your information. Thank you. That takes us to presentations and reports. Discussion of upcoming General Assembly honorary, Mr. O'Rourke is not here, so Mr. Whiteman. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. John would have been here, but his kids had a school event, so he gave me the notes to go over. Plus, we've been doing inspections, so we've had boots on the ground. Over at the high school, all the footings for the addition to the front of the school have been poured. We are installing the groundworks and the rain leaders, and the foundation work should commence shortly. The foundation and slab materials have been delivered, and some electrical work has started inside the school. Southwood has been a good company so far. The superintendent, Ernie, is in constant communication with us, and it appears it's going to be a good project. We've got one issue. The roof system was part of the value engineering to get to the price. They hired an engineering firm to come in and do some thermal imaging of the roof, because we all know the roof has leaked, and the report said 20% of the roof insulation on the entire footprint of the roof would have to be replaced. So they commenced, they rented a machine, and I'm not for sure if you all know that the roof is gravel, the old gravel type roof. Had to rent a machine to come in and peel the gravel off, and they were going to get to that portion of the roof insulation that needed to be replaced. As they started opening up the roof, the entire thing is soaked. So they had to patch that, take a step back and decide which direction we're going to go, and we have to do the entire roof, all the insulation. So right now, they're looking at the roofer as far as the price is going to be. We've lost the value engineering savings that they identified. We have the machine rental for the gravel, which is quite pricey. We've got the cost of all the added insulation and the labor to tear off the entire roof. We don't have a price yet. They're still working it and taking bids, but there is some loss there on the value engineering and maybe some more dollars depending on the bids we get back. But I'll keep Mr. Cully informed on that. Over at Madison Elementary, of course, we have Haley Builders. We have the superintendent is Mark Pitts. He's the gentleman that did county administration. Mark is fantastic, constant communication. Him and John have a great working relationship. The footings and the foundation are being installed on the front of the school. The construction is ongoing for the entrance and the bus loop. The retention pond is close to completion for the stormwater. And the underground stormwater structure has been delivered and they're getting ready to install. All in all, I think it's going along right good according to schedule. Of course, we've had the inclement weather with rain, but at least the cold temperatures, we can get the footers in the ground, hopefully get the masonry up, and we won't have to go to cold weather procedures and then get it under roof.
Okay, board members have questions for Mr. Whiteman? Oh, okay.
Mr. Whiteman, sounds like there's going to be some additional costs, but you have no idea of what the additional cost is going to be in terms of the baseline, in terms of putting the roof on, as well as any changes?
No, sir, not yet. There was a meeting today. The contractor, the project manager, said he didn't have a final price yet, still working with the roofers. I suspect in a week at the, maybe 10 days, we'll know those associated costs. I think it's important, though, and Mr. Elmore, I think you have a good point. The bid was over, and in order to get to the bid price, we had to do some value engineering, and now we've lost that part of value engineering on the roof.
I'm just concerned of how much are we losing as a result of that, and then I'm just surprised that the roofer didn't say this is going to cost X number of dollars to do what needs to be done in order to do the prep work so the roof can be replaced. Seems like they would have given you some indication of cost, or someone an indication of cost and what those measures would lead to.
Yes, sir. They're still, because this roofer has both projects, so a roofer that brings his equipment and men down and he's doing two projects, they're trying to work with him. And like I said, hopefully in a week, 10 days, we'll have that cost.
Okay, but he bid the project, both of them, so he should have, I mean, that's his issue, not mine. My issue is the cost.
Yes, sir.
Overrun.
Yes, sir.
But I appreciate it. Thanks, Ken.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other board members have questions? Mr. Thomas?
One, because the reality is there is going to be an increased cost due to the roof.
That's correct, sir.
And the ballpark is probably $1 million.
No.
500,000?
No.
Ballpark. I'm not going to hold you to it. 300,000?
200,000. Ballpark for right now.
Ballpark.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Other board members? Thank you, Mr. Whiteman.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your report. That takes us to Capital Projects, Plan of Finance, Mr. Rogers and the Davenport Company. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Tell us the good news.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Let me see if I can pull this up. I didn't, Mr. Knight. Okay. All right, evidently we don't have it electronically. You all have a copy of the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Pam, is it on here? Do you know if it's on?
Oh, you don't have a copy down there?
I don't.
You want mine?
There we go. There we go. All right.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Mr. Chairman, so tonight what we're going to do, we're going to actually, really a three-part presentation. And part one is plan of finance for the short-term needs, and that's including, some of you might remember in 2005 we issued some bonds for a fire truck that's already been, that portion has already been amortized. But it was a 20-year amortization. In the final 10 years, which will continue paying off one of the schools, basically it was we had a 10-year fixed rate, and at 10 years that rate was going to be reset. And so we're going to add to that as a part of it some new money for another fire truck and the sheriff's cars. So we'll talk about that. Second, we're going to talk about fiscal policy guidelines. And then third, we're going to talk about future needs out in 2016, including refinancing the Series 2011 lease revenue bond notes, as well as some transportation needs that we've been discussing with staff. So on the short-term side, one good thing is interest rates are in our favor. Interest rates have stayed low over the last several years. We've seen some spikes there on the left-hand side. You can see the 20-year AAA MMD, which is basically a AAA-rated GO, what an interest rate would look like. On the right side, you can see what it's done over the past year. We have seen a little bit of an increase from the early part of the year, but all in all, you can see it's right there around 3%, and that's a 20-year rate. So it's been a good time to borrow money if you've been in the market, and this would be a good time to basically lock in the rate, hopefully for the next 15 to 17 years. Because on this next page, you can see the 2005 debt service at our current rate, the rate that was good for the first 10 years of 3.9%. We still have the amortization that goes out to 2033, which is basically 17 years. What we want to do is also look at financing a new fire truck, and that won't be for the full 17 years because we don't expect that, or the sheriff's cars to last that long. But we would basically amortize that over a shorter period. I think the sheriff's cars, Fran, help me out, we're going to do 3 years, 4 years? 4 years for the sheriff's cars, and then the fire truck, we're going to do 10? Yeah, 10 years on the fire truck. So what we're looking for is to basically send out, with your approval tonight, we'd send out an RFP tomorrow, get it back in time before the next board meeting in December, and with your approval there at the December meeting, we'll come back with a recommendation to lock in that rate and close before the holidays. We have to do it by January 15th of 2016 because that's when the rate basically would be reset. Now, if we did nothing, the rate would be reset without the new money at basically a formula that's in the ballpark of this current rate, but it's only be for 5 years, not basically what we're hoping for is 15 years or longer. One of the options that we're going to do on the RFP is for the full 17 years. There are some banks out there that are not giving us a fixed rate for longer than 10 years or longer than 15 years. So we're also going to show them an option where it's 15 years left on this amortization. In other words, we're going to shorten the amortization by 2 years. It increases the debt service on our given rate by about $30,000 a year, so it's not a huge number. Something I think we can, you'll see in a moment, will work fine with our debt service schedule. Yes, sir.
I just want to remind the board of two things. We were planning on lease financing or financing the fire truck that was approved in the budget for this year, along with the patrol cars. So when this came up, that we had to do this interest rate, we said that's why we added to this, because we think we'll get a better rate than doing those sort of standalone through lease financing like we've done in the past. But that's how we plan to pay for those things that were approved in the budget, were with a lease purchase of both those items.
So essentially, our thoughts are to go through and send this RFP out for a direct bank loan. Obviously, this will be issued through the EDA. We need to go through them. We'd send this proposal out. We send that to over 25 local regional banks. We expect we probably get in 3 to 5 is sort of the norm in terms of the responses we might get back. So basically, we would amortize the the 4.9 million and change that are still outstanding on the 2005 bond, either over 15 or 17 years. 450,000 for the fire truck, again at 10 years, and then 350,000 for 10 sheriff's cars, basically over a 4-year amortization. One just a little side note, it's more of a structuring issue. We have a principal amount that's going to come due on January 15th. Because it's going to be tight in terms of the timing of it and repaying it, one of our thoughts is to use what you've got in the budget right now to downsize the issue, and then I'll have our first principal paid basically in January of next year, 2017, if you will. Based on our current market conditions, we think that we can get a rate in that 3.25 to 3.70 range, or basically better than where we were for the first 10 years, that 3.90 rate, based on the current market. Hopefully we'll get even better than that. Next page just kind of gives you a sense of what the differential is. Assuming we got a rate of 3.25, we actually end up saving over that 3.90 rate, if you will, and I'll put quotes around that savings because it's not true savings, but it will help our debt service, because what you're going to see a little bit later in the presentation is when we've shown you debt service schedules of your existing debt, we've always assumed a 3.90 rate for the rest of this 2000 bond issue. So to the extent we get a lower rate, we'll actually have some savings in the out years in our debt service schedules going forward. So just to give you a sense of what the fire truck and the sheriff car amortization looked like, you can see those here on this schedule. And then we also ran it at a 3.70 rate just to kind of show you the high end of that. You can see there's still a little bit of savings, but not near as much as if we can get on the lower end of it. And then again, here's our fire truck and sheriff cars again at the higher end, 3.70 rate. So from a schedule standpoint, if it's okay with the board, get your nod tonight. Basically, we'll send that RFP out tomorrow. We will get the responses back on December 2nd, come back to you at your December 8th board meeting, and then we'll need to set up a meeting with the EDA after that and work to get closed before the holidays. So that's part one. I'm going to pause for a moment, Mr. Chairman, to see if anybody has any comments or questions on that part.
Would the board like to ask questions now, or just go ahead with the presentation? And okay, so we'll just wait until the end.
Okay, it sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, so the second part of the presentation, I want to talk about ratings. One of the things, as we start looking out, the county has done a phenomenal job of being able to get itself back on firm footing with their fund balance. We'll show you that in just a moment. And so we've talked about over the years why we don't have a credit rating. And one of the reasons is we've not had large enough issues to go out and bond for those. But knowing that there's some transportation needs down the road, it's just something to put in the back of our minds to maybe get ourselves in that position. Thought it might be a good time just to talk about what are the key drivers to a credit rating. And there's 4 basic areas over the next couple pages we'll talk about. First one is the economic base, basically talking about the local, regional, as well as national factors, but obviously more important is what's going on here in the county. They look at demographic characteristics, including what's happening with population, employment, wealth levels, the tax base, how big is it, what's the structure of it, how diverse is it, what type of industry do you have, what's the mix, composition of the employment base, and then what do the patterns look like. And obviously the county's had some nice economic wins here recently, have some things going on in the county coming up, so there's a lot of positives there. Second area is financial performance and flexibility. You look at the revenue expenditure structure and the patterns, look at basically how the historical revenue and expenditures have come in versus some of the budget numbers that you've put out there, and I know those have done well over the last several years. And then we look at fund balance position, and that has been a source of strength here recently. We've been able to build that back up. And then looking at budgeting and long-term financial planning, and it's part of what we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And then finally, pension funding and insurance risk, and the county, of course, participates in the VRS and is in good shape on that. Then number 3 and 4 is really debt factors and management factors. Debt factors basically are what types of securities are out there, and types of what's the debt structure look like, the balance between how fast we're paying the debt off, and not investing in its capital facilities. And the board's done a good job of balancing that, taking care of some of the needs, such as the high school project was just discussed, and keeping up its existing facilities, as well as investing in some of the new facilities. And then what we do is we measure our debt burden against the total tax base, total outstanding debt divided by the tax base of the county, and then we look at debt service as a percentage of budget. We're going to talk about those here in just a moment. And then finally, management factors, and that includes not only your administrative staff, but also yourself, the board, setting fiscal policies, putting those in place, looking at long-term financial planning, and having the capacity to provide for services that the county demands. Just in the last couple of years, both S&P and Moody's have updated their methodology. Thought you might find it interesting to see the types of things that they're going to look at. In September of 2013, S&P revised its methodology to basically look at several factors, and they basically assign a factor of 1 to 5 in each area. Economy being the biggest at 30%, management 20%, institutional framework, which basically means for Virginia, Virginia has a very good institutional framework and actually gets the best score, or 1, primarily because in terms of being able to create revenues, we have a lot of flexibility. The board can set tax rates without having to go out and do a referendum. Some states you actually have to have a referendum to do so. And so as a result, that's one of the key things that makes it the top score there. Financial measures include budgetary flexibility, budgetary performance, and liquidity. And what that means is the budgetary flexibility is having the ability to move dollars around in the budget in a tight year. Having fund balance to be able to pick up if things don't come to fruition in the budget. Liquidity, fund balance again, making sure that you have enough liquidity on hand to take care of any short-term needs should they crop up. And then budgetary performance, how well did your revenues and expenditures do versus your expected budget? And then finally, debt and contingent liabilities, and that's again the debt side and the pension side, and that's 10% of the score. Moody's did a similar update just several months later, January of 2014. Very similar factors, the economy and tax base at 30%, finances at 30%, management at 20%, and then debt and pensions at 20%. And you can see some of the rating sub-factors there on the right side. Again, very similar to what I just discussed with S&P, some of the debt factors, budget factors, fund balance, things like that. So one of the things to think about is putting into place some fund balance policies, debt policies. Some of the examples here on this page, on page 16, include payout ratio. How quickly are we paying off our debts? They like to see a fairly rapid payout ratio for AA rated or better rated entities at 60%. Essentially what that means is within 10 years, 60% of the debt is paid off. Basically what that means is not pushing debt off and having amortizations too long. In terms of total outstanding debt as a percent of the assessed value of the county, one of the levels that we like to look at is not to exceed 4%. That's a policy that, these policies are very similar, for instance, to your neighbor to the north in Spotsylvania they use. Total debt service, including leases, that's a percentage of basically the total budget, including the schools, would not exceed 12%. It's another way to look at kind of keeping your credit card in check and making sure that you're not spending too much of your annual budget, annual dollars, going out for debt service. And on the fund balance side, policy of basically keeping that fund balance as a percentage of, again, overall revenues, including schools, no less than 10% with a target of 12%. And that's something that you guys have worked toward and have now achieved, you'll see in just a moment. And then the last one is something that you might think about that may not be something that's achievable immediately, but something you might strive for, and that is making sure that you're taking some of that annual budget and putting it toward pay-go projects. For instance, the needs for school buses, the needs for sheriff's cars are going to be annually. Rather than going out and borrowing for it like we're proposing to do now, is trying to work toward putting that in the annual budget going forward. This is what the unassigned fund balance looks like. As I said, over the last several years, you've been able to grow that to a point where it's now above the 10 to 12% range that we've talked about or we're suggesting as a possible policy. As you know, that fund balance is used for several things. And so it basically keeps the operations of the government moving forward in terms of you've got debt service, you've got salaries to pay, but your revenues generally only come in once or twice a year. And so you've got to have enough funds on hand. We measure it at June 30th because that's when your audit is finalized, the date of the final year of your budget. But that is a guide that we use throughout the year, and 10 to 12% at that June 30 time period basically allows your bills to be paid without having to go out and borrow any dollars.
Can I interrupt one?
Yes, sir.
One point on that page, 11 and 12 and previous all had that due to from the utility fund. So if you looked at the audit, the fund balance on paper looked better than it actually was in cash. 13 and 14, that fund balance in the audit is actual money in the bank, not a due to owed from the utility fund that, if you remember, we wiped out because we were never going to get that paid. So really 13 and 14 is cash, 12, 11, and 10, and 9, those were including that $4 million number. So if you really look back at 8 and 9 and 10, we were pretty close to no fund balance, is why you had the annual borrowing every year.
That's a good point. Doing accrual accounting, it's hard just to come up with a cash number for governments. So we use this general fund unassigned fund balance, and if you don't dig into the details, you might miss something like that. So it's a very good point. Thank you, Tori. We thought it might be good for you to see a comparison of some of your neighbors and how you stand versus those when you look at fund balance. And on the left side, we've got the actual dollars, if you will. The right side is probably a better way to compare apples and oranges, and that is on a percentage of revenues. And you can see that well up there in the 20% range, there's only a handful of folks who have also saved in that same range. You can see that folks like Stafford and Spotsylvania are in and around that 10%. Knowing, working with Spotsylvania, I know they actually use some of their fund balance each year for some of their pay-go projects and spend the dollars back down to around the 10 to 12% range.
We got more money than that.
I started talking about why it's important to keep that fund balance for those who, for those of us who get paid every couple of weeks, it's easy. That we get those funds in, we pay our bills, and we get paid again a couple of weeks later. For the government, you're collecting taxes twice a year. You get some other revenues here and there from the state, but you've got to be able to provide for those interim periods because you still have salaries to pay and debt service amounts that come due. So number one, it's really the month-to-month cash flow. And a study we did many years back showed that in Virginia, for those governments who collect 2 times a year, at a minimum 8% is needed generally in order to be able to make those slow periods, which are basically at the end of April and the end of October, just before the bills are mailed out. Because as soon as the bills are mailed out, folks begin sending their checks back in, and the coffers begin to refill in terms of the cash that you have on hand. But there's also things such as what happens if a tornado comes through. James City County is a good example. They had straight line winds several years ago. They had a lot of damage to clean up, and once it was all said and done, it took about 3 years for FEMA to finally reimburse them for all of the funds that they had spent. And so you need to have cash on hand to be able to provide in certain situations. And then, of course, what happens if there's an unforeseen expenditure or revenue shortfalls? You want to be able to have some funds on hand to be able to pick those up as well. And of course, one of the things that's most important is the banks or rating agencies are going to look at your flexibility there, and that can also determine how good of an interest rate you might get, is how well your balance sheet looks. The last thing is really, at the end of the day, you do at least earn interest on it. And while right now we're not earning even 1% on that money, if interest rates do get back up to some interest rates we've seen in the past, with the Fed talking about raising rates again here shortly, you do actually get some interest back that helps to go and can be used in the budget. Here's an example of what your debt as a percentage of assessed value looks like. On the left-hand side is historically where it's been, with the lighter green being basically what we see as existing debt going forward. We added the issue there in 2015, so it jumped up. The policy that we talked about is maybe 3, maybe 4%. Here we've used 3%. You can see that you've still got some room, even if we use the lower 3% value. Debt service as a percentage of revenues, again, this is sort of compared to your checkbook. 12% is a guideline that we've used for a lot of AA-rated counties throughout the state. Folks like Spotsylvania, Montgomery County down in Blacksburg uses that as their high point. When you get above 15%, starts getting in sort of the yellow flag area for the credit rating agencies, if you will. So we try to stay a little bit lower than that. You can see we're just above that right now, but once some of the debt starts being paid down over the next several years, and a lot of those are very front-loaded, again, for some of the school buses and things like that we've done over the last several years, that will come down, and you can see it coming down pretty substantially there after a couple of years. And then finally, the payout ratio. And again, that is a guide of basically how much of your principal is paid off in the next 10 years. And one of the measures that we use in a number of our places is looking at the end of the 5-year CIP. Let's try to be at or above that 60% payout ratio at the end of the adopted 5-year CIP. So in this case right now, we're at 54%, so we're a little bit on the lower side. But 5 years from now, if we don't add any more debt, we'll be at 77%. So one of the things that we look at is what happens when we add some of this new debt that we may be talking about down the road. So I want to just kind of give you a feel for some of the things we look at, let you think about it. We can always come back at a later date and give you some other looks. We can talk further about it. But I just wanted to make sure we put that on your radar for the future, because we're going to be talking about the capital needs in the future in 2016, and that's including paying off or I should say, setting up the bond anticipation notes, and begin amortizing that debt. In the existing debt graphs you just saw, we already have that built in. All the existing debt structures that you've seen from us in the past have included an assumed payoff of that, amortizing that debt in the future. And we understand that there are some possible transportation needs out there of about $8.4 million. And so what we've done is added that in as well. I'm sorry, that's the payoff of the, I'm getting mixed up, sorry. That's the payoff of the 2011. The $6 million is the transportation projects in the future. So the $8.4 million has already been factored into the debt service. The $6 million we're going to see in just a moment. So on this page, the $90.9 million of debt that's outstanding on the left side, that includes the $8.4 million of the 2011. That also includes the amortization of the 2005 bonds that we're talking about, resetting that rate here in December.
What's in the 8.4 million?
That's the YMCA and one of the school projects. Bowling Green that we did in 2011.
Okay.
So those are all, so both the 2005 bonds that we're going to rate reset, the 2011 bonds are both incorporated in this $90.9 million. And for the 2011 bonds, we've assumed that we're going to take those out in 2016 and amortize them out at 4%. The next set of columns there where it says the estimated direct bank loan, new money debt, that's basically the fire trucks and the police cars. And then we've got the $6.2 million basically is the transportation debt that would be later in 2016. So then the final column basically is what happens when we add it all together. We have the existing debt plus the proposed new debt. And what we wanted to show was go back to those policies, potential policies, recommended policies, and show what that new debt looks like when we add it in. And that's the blue that's basically added in. It doesn't really take effect in fiscal 17 because we're talking about doing that after June 30th, possibly of next year. And then you can see where you stand versus rated entities basically on a national scale as well as a Virginia scale. And then when we look at the debt service, it does keep us above that line for one more year out in 2017, but then it falls below in 2018. And you can see that we will be a little bit on the high side for the medians, if you will, AA and single A's. But I can tell you that AAA rated Loudoun County, for instance, is right at 10% as well. So you're not too far off those medians. One thing that's important, in the version you got in your board package from Friday, we've actually revised this page since then. We changed the debt structure very slightly, and we're able to make it to where that final column has zeros in all the years, which basically means that based on the existing budgeted debt service, we can add this new debt without impacting your existing budget. And how we do that is essentially you've had some debt items that are rolling off the books, some principal that's being paid down, if you will. And so by freezing, if you will, the 2016 debt service budget, we can bring this additional transportation debt online without impacting your budget. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have at the moment. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure the board members may have questions. I just had a couple of, you talked about the year-end balance.
Fund balance.
And the fund balance and the percentages that we are. So based on what I'm looking at, we're probably somewhere in the area of close to 15 million.
Let's pull back to that page. We're at 14.3 million as of the end of fiscal 14.
Okay.
What's this year's?
Above that.
How much above that?
It's not finished yet. Above that. More than I budgeted to be above that.
Okay. So,
I budgeted to be $350,000 above that number. If you remember back to the budget presentations, we significantly exceeded that. So we had a good year. But we are planning, remember, this year's budget's built on about $1.5 million coming out of the fund balance to balance the budget. But that is a balancing number. Depends on revenues and expenditures. We would not need all of that either. But we had a good year.
okay. All right. Do other board members have questions?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, as always, very thorough. My first question was, do we have the 2015 unencumbered balance? And Mr. Cully's telling me it's probably 14.7 or something like that. But I think you answered the second part of the question that I had, because it seems, just numerically, it seems logical to actually pay for the fire truck and the sheriff cars now and not pay that interest payment later. So just purely numerically, but I understand you want to possibly pull money out of the unencumbered balance next year. And when we get the unencumbered balance to a certain point, we then have to go through the borrowing, the anticipation note we had before for cash flow issues. And I talked to Mrs. Curran, I had no idea, but the school payroll is $2 million a month. So we have to at least have that much money in the bank at all times. But I think, I still would think that's a little better. And then the last one is you have, or next to last, our debt went down $10 million this year, because it was 139 and went down to 129. Things we've been paying off. It's 129 now. Your budget analysis that's on the website says it's 129 now. And that's what he had up there.
Total debt service, 129?
Yes, the actual
Yeah, that's principal and interest.
principal? The actual principal, just the principal?
That's principal and interest, 129.
Just principal?
Principal is 90.9,
Okay.
first column.
Yeah, you're not counting.
But that's
all right.
that's just one category.
You're not counting.
That's
all
just
right.
schools and general government.
General government.
You're not counting utility
Does
debt.
not include utility debt,
Which is what makes the number different.
yes.
Okay, so then the 139 to 129 that we had before is right, including utilities, but then this is something different because it doesn't have utilities in it.
Right.
Okay.
It's just general government and schools. At the end of the day, we'd like to see utilities self-supporting. No, it's not at the moment, but that's the way we've been analyzed it.
All right. We don't have any numbers that say what the impact would be if we actually paid for the sheriff's vehicles and the fire trucks, do we?
Yes.
I mean, that's what pulls it out.
Yeah. So this is at an assumed interest rate of 3.7%. Basically, the fire truck's $555,000
So I'm paying
total P&I.
$130,000 interest.
Yeah, so you'd save $135,000 of interest.
So,
Part of that over 10 years.
but is it better financially? You as a financial consultant? No-
Our
no
recommendation
politics
is,
or
if you're going to
anything.
spend your fund balance, spend it on something that is a one-time expenditure, which this would be. So that is definitely a possibility, yes.
So we could realistically, we save $120,000 by buying these things, but until we know a little bit more about the math, we risk having to borrow or having to have a revenue anticipation note, which costs us $100,000 a shot.
I don't think you have to worry about a revenue
Yeah,
anticipation.
we're really
note
not that close.
Paying this little bit off,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
My understanding is we've been in good shape the last couple of years without, and not needing it.
Right, we haven't used that for a while.
And part of that is, as Mr. Cully said, once you did the do to, do from on the utility side, because if we go back to our fund balance, and that's a very good point that he's made, you know, again, when you look at the accrual side, your fund balance didn't look too bad back in 08, 9, 10, but we know we were having to do those revenue anticipation notes because once you did the do to, from, you really didn't have that much in cash. 13 and 14 don't have the do from in it anymore, and so you're in a much better position than you were 5 years ago.
Say
So-
that again, I just want everybody to hear. You just said we're in much better financial condition now than probably we've ever been in.
Since I've been working with you, yes, sir. And that goes back to year 2000?
Mr. Thomas, I would recommend at least let him go out and see what we can get for the interest rates on the fire truck and the cars, and maybe buy the police cars and finance the fire truck, or buy both, or finance both. Just let us look.
Right, but I mean, I don't mind looking, I don't mind talking, but when we get to the reality is, I'm gonna save $130,000 if I don't do that. What are the negative impacts on the county if I do?
Yeah.
And if there's no
essentially-
negative impacts, I might as well save the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is it, if the fund balance will obviously go down, but is that gonna cause a negative impact if the fund balance is already above what he's recommending?
We're talking about $800,000 essentially of
But
fund balance.
he's saying, but he also didn't say how much better we did this year. He just said significant. And nobody wants to define significant right now. So until you define significant, I don't know. I'm just guessing. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. If we got close to $1 million in additional revenue now, shouldn't we just go ahead and buy these things and not incur more debt unless we won't get a really good rate? Now, if the rate is 4%, then the math is different.
Right.
So I guess we'll figure that out when you go out to RFP.
We'll do the RFP, come back, we'll do a not to exceed number, and then we can always peel back on December 8th. You can tell us we want a lesser amount. That's
Can
fine.
you do an RFP with options? I want to borrow X million dollars for the reset and an option of borrowing another 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 for the other thing?
We'll get one rate, but yes, we can do an A/B option.
Okay.
And actually what we have in there right now in our draft is an option at 17 years and an option at 15 years. We can add another option at 17 and 15 years without the fire truck and the police
Okay.
cars.
I think that's the kind of
The
choice
rates
we
may
need
end up
to
being
have.
the same.
Yeah, maybe the same, it may be
But-
less, maybe more. But then we'd have all the figures to make a good decision.
And my point earlier was that the hope is that maybe one day we get the sheriff's cars into the annual budget, because
Right.
you're replacing cars, let's face it, they're on the road all the time. So we're constantly, I know from our budgeting days, replacing those. So if we can add, $350,000 into the annual budget, then we don't have to worry about borrowing them again.
Hopefully, some of the economic development things we have will be able to earmark those things. Thank you,
Then-
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Black, did you have a question?
Yeah, just have one, I appreciate the report. I guess when you go out for a bond rating, this in all counties, is any utility debt, is it the same that no utility debt is ever counted?
It depends on the level of how much support is being given by the general fund to the utility fund. So,
Like in our case?
in our case, probably we would show it with
Yes.
and without. What I would probably do in our case here would be to, I want to go back to the graph here, would be in a case like this, show here's our general government and school debt, and then maybe have a different color on the top part of the bar and show this is how much the utility debt. And then, if we can, show a plan to wean ourselves off, if we can. And that may not be possible, but see what it looks like.
Mr. Colley, what is the utility debt right now? Do we know? Do we have a number, Mr. Shebel? What that stands at?
Apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head.
$39 million.
So it's
39,894 is what we have from November 1. That's from Mr. Cully's report in November.
Is it principal and interest or just principal?
That's probably principal
That's
only.
just principal.
Is there a way we could get these, some numbers that include utilities
Sure.
as well? Because this is a good report, but
Yes,
I
sir.
felt like there was a big chunk missing. Utility debt is, I appreciate everything Mr. Shebel's doing, and we're a growing county, I think, obviously it's economy of scale, but at the same time, we're kind of ignoring a big factor of our debt, which is the utility debt at this time.
Yeah, and what we'll do is, typically you wouldn't add the debt service on top of revenues because we're talking about debt service here of what I'll say general fund in schools on top of the general fund in schools budget. We can add the debt service on the utilities, but we'll need to add the utility budget as well.
Okay,
That's because there's
perfectly
revenue
fair.
that covers part of that. So,
Sure.
right, much of the utility debt, all of operations and part of the utility debt's covered by the.
Sure.
Debt
by
service,
the-
we're still working on.
By the
Right.
utility system. It changes every year based on
Sure.
connections, but, one year we only transferred 600,000, so that's
It's
what
anywhere
made it-
between 600,000 to close to 1.8 million, right?
Correct.
So it's in that time, yeah. But that's still significant. We're talking.
Significant, but it's
Yeah,
not
we're
the whole
talking
debt.
6 or 7 cents on our tax rate, basically.
It hadn't, since I've been here, we've never transferred that much, I don't think. It's averaged in the 600 to 700.
Okay, so 3.
We budget a different
2, 3.
number, but there again, that's a budget number,
Yeah.
and if you underspend,
Yeah,
it's
right.
more money.
It'd just be a number that would be interesting to see
Sure.
when you add that in there, so I would appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can do that, and that's probably the next hurdle, which might take some years, but is to try to make that a self-supporting entity by itself and not
Absolutely, yeah.
relying on
Okay.
tax-supported dollars.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, could I add the follow-up to Mr. Black's question? Because I had it up. The general government debt is 30 million, the school debt is 57 million, and the utility debt was 39 million. And that's based on Mr. Cully's report. I just happened to have it up beforehand.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for
Oh,
the report.
I'm sorry, were you finished, Mr. Black?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Underwood?
I'd just like to ask Mr. Cully to kind of give me a reaction to what you've heard, and then you talked about having the unencumbered balance continue to grow, and what's your feeling based on, as our county administrator, your professional idea?
I would like to have it as, in a reasonable amount, but it's nice to have that, to be able to not have to raise taxes. So we have some
Correct.
new development coming on, but before I'm going to see any tax revenue, that's going to be several
years.
budget years.
Right.
And so to be able to keep the tax rate flat, if I can use not the 12 to 15%, that's in reserve to pay bills, but money that's over that to balance the budget. That's the goal I'm trying to get to. So yeah, that we're at 20% leaves me that room, and if anything happens during the year that we need some money for, roof, which I'll probably bring to you in another month or two. There are these things that come up mid-cycle of a budget that you need some money for. It's nice to have that money in the bank, and you're not dipping into the fund balance part of the reserve that you really need, so you don't have to borrow money, revenue anticipation note either. So I'm not opposed to looking at paying for this fire truck, but I'd like to next year's budget, FY17, to be able to say, we don't want to lease school buses, we're just going to buy school buses, or we want to buy patrol cars. And I'm not sure we're there. That might help me next year not have to borrow, if I borrow this year, see what the overall fund balance gets to, and then be able to come to you with the budget in the spring and say, I don't want to lease cars, I think we buy cars, or I want to lease one bus and buy 4.
So what I hear you say basically is that we're moving in the right direction, but let's make sure we have a solid foundation before we pay off the fund balance, pay off those one-time expenditures, and continue to use those low interest rates so we don't have to worry about increasing taxes.
Especially if it's a low rate.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Akers?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman, but I do have a comment, and it has to do with the utility budget and the utility debt. I just hope we don't lose track or lose sight of the fact that when we have enjoyed good revenues from commercial development and other type of businesses come to the county, and that would not be possible if it was not for the water and sewer that we have run through the county. And so I think when you look in terms of that debt, we don't look in terms of the revenue that we are enjoying from those businesses as a way of paying off that debt. Now, if we had transferred the revenue that we received from McKesson and the truck stops and all the other businesses that we have in the county to the utility debt process, then the debt wouldn't be as great as it is, and the revenues would be more than enough in order to cover its debt. So, yeah, it's one thing to pick out one particular area and jump on it and say that's cost the county, but I think that you need to look at the large picture and see where the revenue is coming from and why the revenue is coming in to the county. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Rogers, I'm looking at the impact on debt service versus revenues, and you talked about bond ratings, and you've got a graph below that shows where we're at versus where like AA or single A's would be in terms of actual, I guess, percentage of expenditures. And I see us way out beyond that graph. Yeah, that's it. So I guess my question is, if we went for a bond rating, how do we manipulate, or what do we have to pay off to actually get ourselves within some of those numbers?
Great question. And I purposely wanted to start introducing, we've talked about it in the past, and it's been a while. I wanted to bring this back up to you. I think part of that goes back to the message of trying to get away from down the road, and like Mr. Cully said, it may not be this year, maybe it's next year, we stop borrowing for school buses, we stop borrowing for the sheriff's cars, because a lot of the front-loaded, you see how quickly that starts falling off.
Does everybody in the audience understand that Caroline's the top bar on that, and that everything below that is the rating systems that we're talking about? I don't know what you can read. It's hard for us to read up here.
Yeah, and the green is Caroline.
Can you explain that a little bit for us,
The green
Mr.
is
Rogers?
Caroline. The tan are national medians, starting with a AA, the highest AA rating, and then the bottom is the lowest A rating. The green are Virginia AA's down to Virginia A2, which is the middle of the range. And the reason the Virginias, let me just say, we'll focus more on Virginia for a moment, because the region of Virginia's is higher than the national medians. Many of the states, like let's take Pennsylvania for instance, have school districts that have their own borrowing powers. So nationally, there are more states like that, and so they don't, the counties, if you will, which is what we're seeing on the tan, don't have debt for schools. So theirs typically skew lower. That's why we also put Virginia's in here, because obviously Virginia's counties have to borrow for schools, and that's why our medians are higher. And again, this is median, so there are some that are much lower, there are some that are much higher. As I said earlier, Prince William County and Loudoun, for instance, are both slightly above 10% right now because they have so many schools that are constantly borrowing to try to keep up with the capital there. How do you get it down? Is we try to get our debt service down. And again, I know we haven't added the utilities yet, so I'm just trying to focus on normal governmental school debt. And part of that is, if you look at our debt service, here on the next page, the existing debt, you see we're at like 9.6 million right now. We go to 9.1. We clicked in 2 years, we're down below $1 million from that top end of 9.6. And then within 5 years, we're $2 million below that existing debt service number. And the reason a lot of that is because of some of the short-term borrowings that we've been doing for sheriff's cars, the school buses, things like that. If we can work those and quit borrowing for those and put those into the operating budget, that's going to bring that debt service expenditure number down pretty quickly.
Because right now, the way I read the graph, that we would be foolish to try to go get a national or a state rating.
Right.
Because we could not make it with the percentage.
We're probably in the A range if we went today, and that's why I didn't suggest let's do it. I wanted you to see what it looks like, just kind of reintroducing the thought, here's where we need to go. We've now got our fund balance up to some very healthy levels. Now we've got to work on some of the other areas.
All right, thank you.
Just one question, and I know this is not something we even have any control over, but if the schools had taxing authority, would we then have to include, would their debt be included in ours if they had
In this
taxing
analysis,
authority?
if they had their own taxing ability and ability to borrow, then we would take out of this calculation that we're looking at here of debt service, their debt service would be taken out, their revenues would also be taken out of this calculation.
I was just thinking if that were the case, then that would even make us look quite a bit better, because a lot of our...
Mr. Taylor, you're exactly right, which is why those national medians are so much lower, because most of those counties don't have schools.
Aren't those added together for bond ratings for counties because of the tax load on the actual real estate that you've got? Because that factors in to your ability to borrow and your bond rating as
They
well.
look at that from an overlapping debt standpoint, but the primary ratios is what we're talking about. So they don't look at that as much. That is something they will look at. What Mr. Seeley is referring to is the overall debt burden on all the taxpayers. That they will look at that, but they're really looking at that. The one entity they're rating is, in this case, would be a county without a school district. So they're really looking at that harder than they're looking at the overall debt burden to the taxpayers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davenport. We appreciate your time. We do have to do a motion to proceed with the RFP. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we ask Davenport and Company to proceed with the RFP as Mr. Rogers has discussed, 15 and 17-year options, and the additional option of with and without the sheriff's vehicles as part of that. That's the motion.
so moved and properly second that we would proceed with the RFP as presented, with the additions that Mr. Thomas talked about. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that takes us to a report on placement of Bowling Green Senior High School monument lettering. Is this, okay, Joey?
Mr. Shebel, do you have it on?
I do not.
We have it.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good evening.
Tonight's presentation, I bring before you a recommendation for placement of a monument. If you remember and recall at your August 18th meeting, the Bowling Green alumni came before you and made a presentation asking that Bowling Green Senior High be added to the monument, add a monument as well as the lettering to the building. Since that meeting, the alumni has had a monument made, and the cover page shows a picture of that monument. And now we need discussion of, sorry, Mr. Taylor, it's actually on your report.
I kept thinking he was going to show it.
Now the question is where would the board like to have that placed? There was discussion to have that as you walk into the front doors on the right-hand side, as the former Union High is to the left. It would look nice there. However, we have a solids handling tank that is buried right there that would have to be dug up on occasions and pumped. So we didn't think that was the best place to be able to place that. Another idea was to place it adjacent to the existing monument. Both of the monuments are fairly close in size. We could arrange that area there and have both of those monuments side by side, a little bit of space in between them, but we think we could make it look real nice there. Another option is as you're coming into the auditorium, possibly place it to the right of the sidewalk there. So that's the first discussion we would like to have with the board of where you would like that. The second is the board wanted us to look at how we would arrange lettering on the building, and we have had our sign contractor come out and look at that and come up with some recommendations. So on page 2 of the report, you'll see the current layout, and at the very bottom, you'll see the formerly Union High School. The first idea that they came up with is adding lettering on the bottom band of the sign. You'll see that at the very bottom picture on page 2. The cost to add that additional lettering, and along with that, they would repaint the existing letters up there so that they would look nice again, and wash the entire sign to bring that back so that it looks brilliant again instead of how it looks today, and add that lettering. That would cost $2,068 to do that. The second option that they gave to us is to remove the current former Union High lettering and to add a black backing and put the lettering that says formerly Union High School and Bowling Green Senior High. That cost to do that was $1,949. And the last proposal was to completely remove all the lettering from the sign, completely redo the sign, wash the sign, fix all the repairs from where the current lettering is in there, add underneath the formerly Union High and Bowling Green Senior High underneath of that, and recenter the entire sign. And the cost of that is $3,900. And with that, I would like the board to give directions to staff of how you would like us to proceed with installing the monument as well as possible lettering of the building.
Board members have a preference?
I guess my question is does the committee that came said they had raised the funds to do it? Do they have sufficient funds for the lettering the way it's been presented? I guess that's the first question. I don't know if anybody who's here could answer that, but that would be beneficial.
I am not aware of that conversation. I haven't been involved in any of that.
We talked about it at our board meeting.
The funds have been raised for the monument, but not for the lettering.
Okay.
We didn't have a price on that, hadn't really discussed that we're ready to proceed with installing the monument, and whatever y'all want to do about the sign.
Okay.
Whether we need to raise the money or the county pay for it. Thank you.
I guess, and this is my concern, the lettering, I guess we're going to have to move the lettering that's up there at some point unless we just decide. Okay, well, if we look at just adding Bowling Green Senior High School, you know, I don't know if that can be done, because we can look at the four examples that they gave, and I don't know if the committee has a preference as to which one they should use or not. But they have come up with the cost of the monument.
Yeah.
I personally don't have a problem with helping them out with the lettering.
Let's do the monument first, because I think they've raised the money. They had the monument built. Let's go ahead and do the monument, and I think, I mean, my opinion again, I think it would be fitting if the monument was next to the Union High School monument, and we could actually make that a little flower garden or something, and make it a little more decorative and show it the respect they both deserve. I think that we all agree on that.
Yeah.
So if we go ahead and say, let's do that first,
You want to make that a motion?
I'll make that a motion if you want to vote right now, that we go ahead and allow the, I guess, alumni of Bowling Green Senior High School to erect or have their monument erected next to the monument that's already there for Union High School, and direct Mr. Shebel to make it look appropriate. That would be a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would go ahead and allow the monument to be placed representing Bowling Green Senior High, and that Mr. Shebel would work towards the centering of the monument to make it look nice. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. All right, once that's done, then are you going to then come back later and talk about the lettering, or do you want to talk about the lettering now?
Talk about
the
it
letter
now.
I don't have a problem. And I know nobody's going to say this, so I probably have to. I was here in 1969. I wasn't going to school in Caroline, but I was here in 1969 when Bowling Green Senior High was opened, right? You folks didn't
The
go.
fall of '69, it was open.
Yeah, you guys are too young to have gone there then, but we have Union High School, which was the historically black school. We all know that, but Bowling Green Senior High was the first integrated high school in Caroline. So I think they deserve recognition too, my opinion, and I would like to add, to pay tribute to that, I would like to add their name under where Union High School is, like option 1, I think it is. And I think that pays tribute to both of those entities. This is a case where we can look back at our history.
I think that's the best looking one myself personally.
And I do agree that the letters out there need to be, I mean, it's got age. We came into this building, what, 1992?
No, they moved out in 92.
Okay, so it's...
We didn't get in until like 96 or 97.
So we're still looking at it's 10 years old.
Yeah.
And
More
based
than
on what I read, the letters need to be redone.
Right.
So you may as well do it all, do the facelift all at one time and just clean it all up and replace it.
And do option, so we want to do
Option
option
one.
1?
No,
I think-
option 3.
Options.
Staff would recommend 3.
Three is
That
the-
spaces
okay.
them out better because you move the seal up a little bit and you move Caroline County up and you fit it in. Otherwise, the Bowling Green Senior High would end up on a border at the bottom.
That's correct. There's a
There's
10-inch
a
band
10-inch
that actually
band at
sticks
the
out
bottom.
with an 8-inch
It
letter.
sticks out. So that's where that would ultimately go if you do option 1, which we don't think would look as good. It's cheaper,
Okay.
but wouldn't look as good.
Okay.
But
It
1
would
and
look
3
like it was added.
1 and 3 have the same appearance to me, just
That's
looking at
correct.
the thing. So option 3 is a little more cleanup work and things like that.
Yeah, and it's just centering
And
it
it
up so it's
centers
not
it
on
up. It raises the whole works up.
Okay.
How much money do y'all have for the second part? You got $5?
I think basically they were saying that the money hadn't been raised for the second part, but in as much as we have to redo the lettering anyway,
Mr. Taylor,
I would think that.
I would just go ahead and make a motion that we adopt option 3, clean up the entrance.
I'll second
Add that.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second that we would use option 3 at a cost of $3,900 for the lettering. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, I
Yes.
would only ask the board that when C.T. Smith and Lady Smith High School comes to this board for some lettering on that building over there on the west side of the county, that you be just as generous to that group as you've been to this group.
As long as they raise money for their own monument.
Monument, they'll raise money. Okay, thank you.
And there's something in the building.
I'm sorry.
There's something in the building aside
There's
from
always
being a
something in the
storage
building.
room right now.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure that will take place. Okay,
Thank you, folks.
that takes us to appointments. Social Services Board, are you ready to make that appointment, Mr. Black?
Mr. Chairman, I am going to defer that till January.
Okay, all right, Planning Commission, Madison District, Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to reappoint Mr. Charles Shoebridge to the Madison District Planning Commission,
Okay.
as a Planning Commission member from Madison District.
And I would like to add Mrs. Carl Horton as the Planning Commission representative for the Port Royal District.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint Mr. Charles Shoebridge, Madison District Representative on the Planning Commission, and Mrs. Carol Horton as the Port Royal Planning Commissioner on the planning.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would add the name of Charles Shoebridge to represent the Madison District on the Planning Commission, and Carl Horton to represent the Port Royal District on the Planning Commission. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to the consent agenda. Approval of warrants. A, B, C, approval of Planning Commission schedule. D, adoption of Resolution R 2915 regarding allocation of VDOT 2016 and 17 revenue sharing funds. And E, approval of the governor's holiday schedule for county employees. Is there any agenda item that a board member would like to pull?
I'd like to pull agenda item C.
Agenda item C, Planning Commission schedule. Do you have a question about that? Or?
I just think that there's some investigation that needs to be done before we move forward with at least one of the agenda items in this.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda A, B, D, and E?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and properly, is there a second? Been moved and properly second that we approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and E. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? All right, it stands approved. Agenda item C, did you have a particular concern?
Particular one, the SBX 04-2015. A campground by definition by the Virginia Health Department sets certain standards, and I'm concerned that moving forward with this, since we would be setting a precedent, that we have staff do some investigation on what this means to us in the future. Because currently we do not have anything like this in the county that's not approved as a much larger facility. I'd like to just pull that one until we get some information from staff.
I guess the problem that I have with that is I happen to know that there is a particular request coming, and I would like to have an opportunity to vote on it. This particular issue is not vet taxing. I think it's 4 or 5 pad sites that the landowner wants to use. He already has water and sewer there, and he'd like to use his camper there. It's private. It's not a public campsite. And I think so having said that, if we defer C, then that will not come up in my time, and I would like an opportunity to.
By definition, by the health department, any pad individually set is designated as a campground, and I'd like to make sure that staff, we have an understanding of what that means long-term, because we're setting a precedent with this.
And again, as I said.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I will make a motion to pass it on through, but I guess my concern is the fact that it has gone through the Planning Commission. Mr. Fincham is staff, and I would trust that Mr. Fincham, he's been here 22 years, and he has, I would assume, has been diligent in researching issues in the past. I would think he would be as diligent in researching this issue, and the Planning Commission has received it, they've approved it and passed it on to us, and all we're doing is just approving the Planning Commission schedule.
Mr. Fincham, did that come up in Planning Commission?
Excuse me, Mr. Fincham, you don't have to answer that. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we pass.
Well, wait, we're still in discussion. It was my pulled from the agenda. I have the ability to ask questions, Mr. Taylor.
At this point, we are approving a schedule.
Mr. Taylor, I pulled it from the consent agenda,
Okay,
which is
all
my
right.
privilege.
Go ahead, Mr. Fincham, answer the question.
Mr. Sealy, I would need to go back and look at the minutes. I don't recall your specific concern. I will tell you that that site was originally permitted as a campground under VDH regulations.
But nobody's looked at where we're at today, because that's very long ago.
It has a valid VDH permit based upon the approval from some years ago. Notwithstanding that VDH permit, we had the other issue as to the validity of that use, which went to the BZA, and the BZA upheld staff's determination that it was a violation of the ordinance.
So it's, the BZA found it in a violation for even how it was originally set up. So here we are now with a violation with a special exception.
Yes, sir. And if
So we're
approved,
trying to circumvent something that's already been done, that's been found in violation by BZA. I don't have to answer that, that's fine.
No, I didn't answer.
I mean, go ahead, Mr. Fincher.
That was insane. That was Mr. Fincher.
BZA affirmed my decision as the zoning administrator that the improvements were constructed in violation of the ordinance. Affirmed. Which has been appealed to the circuit court. Not sure the current status at the circuit court. The applicant chose to pursue the special exception permit, which, if approved by the Board of Supervisors, would then make that a permitted use, a permitted special exception use. And if so, then would eliminate the need for the applicant to continue his appeal of the BZA's affirmation through the legal process.
Thank you, Mr. Fincher. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I do move that we approve the consent agenda item number C, approval of planning commission schedule.
Is there a
Doesn't mean we're going to approve the special exception. It only means that we have approved the schedule of the planning commission.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and probably second that we approve agenda item C. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
And it stands approved 5-1. Okay, that takes us, at this point,
15.
we'll take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back for public comment and the public hearing. The Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting, and we are now at agenda item, well, we had public comment. We apologize for being a little late, but this is the public comment section of our meeting. It is at this time that citizens can come forward and address the board on any issue that is not a public hearing or not on the agenda for discussion. We don't have a sign-up sheet, but I do have a request from Minister Biber to come before the board. He has an emergency and needs to leave, so Pastor, if you will come at this time, it is now public hearing. I'm sorry, it is now public comment.
Thank you. I'm Father J. Biber, the pastor of St. Mary of the Annunciation in Ladysmith. And I want to thank first Mr. Thomas, Mr. Akors, who have worked with me on this, as well as Mr. Gary Wilson from the Economic Development Office. The thinking began, you have the paper in front of you, and I basically want to make a request of each of you. The thinking began once I heard that all the jobs were coming to the county, and I realized that there's no guarantee that those jobs are going to go to Caroline residents. They'll go to whoever's ready to get them. And so it seemed like a historic opportunity with that much employment coming to the county, and yet we'd be very capable of missing the opportunity as well if we weren't ready. And so I began to look at the lead time between now and probably 18 months, 2 years, when the construction would be going on. And we have a food pantry in our place, and many of us in the county know that there are an awful lot of people, in addition to the registered unemployed, who are folks largely from generational poverty, for whom this would be an enormous opportunity to get up to the next level, but it's going to need some help. I started out on page 1 in making the case just with the idea that this presents between 2015 and 17 a unique window for us. There are great job readiness programs out there. I'm working with Wendy Sneed, who's the Director of Social Services, on this. That's why I call it a public-private partnership. So there are great programs out there, but it's not easy to get the right people who need them to them. And so my idea, when working with the poor, relationships are of primary importance, and rather than just try to offer another meeting, let's find a bunch of great volunteers, of mentors, coaches, train them up, and meet the poor where they are. To become mentors and coaches to folks who maybe are just that much below where they need to be, in terms of getting onto the radar, in terms of getting visible and competitive to get these new jobs that are going to be developing over the next couple of years. Where would we go? Places like food pantries, church services, county and school gatherings, yard sales, you name it. We would also, and if you see the bottom of that page, I'd be looking, what I'm looking to you to tonight is as a referral source. I'll get to that at the end, but we'd be asking the Board of Supervisors, agencies, Sheriff's Office and courts, Head Start, DSS, food pantry personnel, churches, etc., for referrals, both for the mentors and coaches, folks who are capable, and if you turn to the second page there, these are folks who are going to learn the technical stuff of where to point people in terms of what's out there, but they're going to develop a relationship. It's personal, to work hand in hand with 1 or 2 or 3 people to help get them to the place, where they can enter into the work culture. So the kinds of people I think we're looking for here are folks who are capable of moving between tribes, who are capable of stepping out of whatever the middle-class world that they live in is, and be able to sort of rub elbows and work hand in hand and develop relationships with those who are poor, who have had to develop different sets of values over time. I think of Ruby Payne and the whole idea of bridges to poverty. That would be part of our training program for all of our people. So basically what I'm asking you tonight is I'd like a recommendation from each of you. Who might be a good mentor or coach? Who do you know? Who can you talk to that might be a good mentor or coach? Somebody that over this period would be willing to sort of spend time with people to help 1, 2, 3 people from Caroline County. Give them that little bit that they need to get to the next level. Also, I'd like you to be thinking of who might be candidates. Maybe a person who's capable of full employment but who's been held back, perhaps chronically underemployed. But it could be education, previous incarceration, loss of confidence in the ability to compete, resulting from generational poverty, fear of leaving the familiar, loss of benefits, transportation, etc. We think we can find there are people that we've seen who are ready to go the next step. And just like those of us who got to go the next step, we all need a little help. I'd love to see this happen in this historic window and not waste it. And not waste it. Because we could easily waste it. The organization plan, initially what I'm looking for, I'll be done in a minute, to initiate a test group in the beginning of the year, beginning now, but really beginning in the new year, of a dozen mentor coaches working with a dozen candidates. Iron out get rid of the bugs. Find out that go through an abbreviated training that Wendy and her friends from Department of Social Services, together with the other agencies around here who have great programs, are designing. Then the larger picture is to recruit from clubs, churches, agencies, etc., a cadre of 30 to 60 mentor coaches between now and February. To recruit candidates between now and May. To train the mentor coaches between March and May, and then enter into the full court press, what I'm just calling a full court press, between June of 16 and August of 17, to get in touch with as many folks as we can who are perhaps underemployed, who have never had the full taste, and get them ready to enter into the work culture. My contacts are right there, and just my request to you is on the back page, and I have more of these. I'll just leave them in the chair for anybody here.
Give them to Mr. Parton.
Okay. On the back page, of course, since I'm a priest, I'm probably a little biased, but I'm asking you, who do you know who you think might make a good mentor coach or a good candidate? You know the characteristics I've spoken of. Then I'll add in, maybe say a little prayer before speaking with him or her or calling him or her up. If they want more information, all the coordinates for Wendy and for me are in there. And then we'd like to hear from that man or woman. We'd like to hear so that we know that this is something they're doing on themselves. But please keep us in your prayers. I hope I'll get names from you. I'm asking them from a lot of other people too. But that as this grows, I think we'll have a solid organization. And God willing, it could be a very special time for many people in our county and turn a big corner. So I thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. And I will just add that Jimena has the workforce program, and that certainly ties into what you're doing here, and just another way that we're trying to make sure that Caroline County residents are available for these jobs and find out basically the skills that are necessary and ways we can train people such that they will be ready to fill these positions when they come. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Mr. Chairman, could I have one thing?
I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas.
It's fine. We don't normally make comments after public comment, but Father Jay is part of the ministers' conference that we meet with monthly, and as part of that, Father Jay took it upon himself to develop this program, and I suggested he come to the board because I thought it would be a great story that would be in the newspapers, and if we could get that additional publicity, it would be a big help for the program. So I did say it would be a great story to have in the newspaper, didn't I? Didn't I? Okay. So I think it's a great story to have in the newspaper and to make sure that we start this program off right. And Father Jay, we appreciate it, and I think I have your note copy.
Okay. Thank you, Floyd.
Okay, thank you.
You got a name already?
Are there other persons who would like to speak under the public comment portion of our meeting? Come forward now.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes is here in reference to an item, let's see, 10, item 10 on the agenda. If you will allow her to speak during the item, during the discussion on item 10, that would be great, and she will not have to do it during public comment period. But if you do not allow her to speak during public or during that particular discussion, then I would ask her to come in and let you know.
We will allow you to speak during the presentation.
We're going to
not the presentation, but the agenda item, item 10. So when we get to agenda item 10, you may come.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Okay. Any others wanting to speak on the public comment? Are there any other persons who would like to speak under the public comment section of our meeting? Seeing no one with the intention or desire to speak, I will close the public comment section of our meeting. That takes us to public hearings. Our agenda item 4, which is a text amendment, 5, which is a rezoning, and 6. 4 and 5 have been deferred. Well, my understanding is there was a problem with the advertising, and they were not advertised the length of time that's necessary, so the board cannot make a decision on 4 or 5 tonight anyway. So they have been deferred. And of course, agenda item 6 has been postponed. Now, if there is someone here who would like to speak to 4 or 5, if you are here and you came for that, I can't open the public hearing because we can't have the public hearing. But I will allow you to come and speak on the text amendment or the rezoning if there is someone who would like to do that. If not, the public hearing will be rescheduled and you will have an opportunity to come at that time. Okay, seeing no one with the intent or desire to speak, agenda item 6 is postponed, so that takes us to unfinished business. Special exception 03-2015, Auburn Properties, LLC owner, partnership Verizon Wireless is the applicant. Okay, Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, action on this item was deferred from your last board meeting to allow staff and council additional time to review condition number 15, which had been added after the Planning Commission made its recommendation. Staff and the board obviously are interested in providing rural broadband service to Caroline County, and actually there's a text amendment later on tonight that we would ask you to take a look at to allow us to look at our ordinance to expand those opportunities. However, staff noted its concern with condition number 15 at your last meeting, and after further discussion with council, we believe that it's probably not appropriate to make that a condition of the special exception permit. And with that, we would recommend that if the board is going to approve this, that you approve it with the original 14 conditions.
Okay, board members have questions?
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Fincham?
Yes, sir.
Just for the clarity of all those who may or may not know, condition 15 referenced the county's ordinance that required a new antenna to have a public broadband location on it, right? Or the ability for us to put a public broadband antenna on it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the conflict actually came because of the 2001 or 2005 Telecommunications Act, which is actually out of date, but that's a whole other congressional story. But because that act conflicts and says we can't make this requirement, that's why you dropped condition 15.
That, as well as some language that was added to the Code of Virginia relative to conditions, board approvals, etc. But yes, there is state law that we believe is inconsistent with that condition.
And I had to catch my tongue there for a second. But the state law really has nothing to do with the real issue, because it's county, federal, that's really the issue. The applicants are back there, right? Would they have any problem? I'm not asking, I'm not asking for anything, I'm just asking a question. Would you consider putting hardware on the tower? I'm very much in favor of your application. Would you be willing to put hardware on the tower to possibly support something when we got this resolved? Huh?
That's a condition.
No, I'm not. I'm asking if they would put hardware on there. You can say no. It's not a condition. I'm just asking them. I can ask. They can say no, it won't hurt my feelings. Ben, is it wrong for me to ask? You don't have to answer that. Go ahead. Because I'm going to ask anyhow. I've already explained the fact that it's against or there's a conflict with the federal legislation. It's not a condition. I'm just asking you, when you construct it, would it be a problem if you put hardware up there for an antenna once we resolve this issue? That's all I'm asking. Go ahead.
My name is Jeff Geiger. I'm an attorney for Suckle Partnership doing business with Verizon Wireless, representing the applicant this evening. We welcome any county emergency communication equipment to come on our tower for free. Any commercial enterprise, any of our competitors, the EDA that you are thinking of forming for broadband service is a commercial competitor. We would welcome them. You just pay rent. Same rent that AT&T would pay, that Intellis would pay, that type of thing.
Now, the emergency...
I can't give you that for free because that becomes a regulatory taking under Kilo. And at that point,
That's why you said the lawyer instead of engineer, right?
And my hunch is the statute your county attorney is thinking about says that it is illegal. It was the change this past July that it's illegal for you to impose an unconstitutional condition as a part of a rezoning action, such as a special exception. And if you do, we can challenge it in court, and we get attorney's fees.
Right.
And it's really the attorney's fees that you really don't want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. I think, we've gotten the answers. You're certainly welcome to talk with him as long as you want to after the meeting. But
I'd be happy to stick around and explain,
Oh, I understood.
a bit further.
Okay.
I understood what you said.
Thank you.
I'm not a lawyer, but I understood what you said.
Thank you.
Okay,
What's wrong with asking?
how does the board wish to handle this special exception?
I'll make a motion to approve special exception 03-2015, the Auburn Properties LLC owner.
I'm just going to second it and thank them for putting the hardware up.
It's been moved and properly second that we would approve special exception
Mr.
03-2015
Fincham, I think, has an addition.
As recommended by the Planning Commission.
as recommended by the Planning
I'll
Commission.
amend for that.
Okay, 14 conditions.
I already had mine in there, so we're good.
All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 5-1. Okay. All right, that takes us to agenda item number 8, continued discussion of possible county ownership of the former Frog Level Volunteer Rescue Squad. We talked about this in our last meeting. Board members had concerns. Board members have questions for Chief Loftus or how would you like to
I
address
think
this issue?
we included everything in the packet that we've been able to uncover with the property, and if you want to move forward, we do believe for liability purposes that we get the second phase of the environmental study completed.
Okay, so we need a motion to do that for the second phase of the environmental study. Okay, is that? Obviously, we need to do this because if there's a need or if there's something there that's...
We don't own the building. We don't need to do anything. At this point in time, we don't own the building, so we don't know anything about it. And at this point, with the liability that was pointed out in this, I don't see why we would go forward.
Mr. Chairman, this is in my district, and I think there are a few uncertainties, and I'm just not sure that I'm willing to go to phase 2 and spend $6,000 or $5,600 of taxpayers' money to determine if we should take over this property without, and possibly not run into other situations. I just don't think we should do it.
And I certainly respect that. I guess my only thought was, I was looking at how much the building is valued at. And I understand that $6,000 is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in comparison to the total value of the property. And I don't know whether the board would want to give away or walk away from a building with that value without knowing whether or not, I mean, I guess I would rather lose $6,000 than to give away the value of that building, because we may find that there's not a problem. So, but it's a board decision, and I concur with the majority.
And I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Chairman. It's one of those things where you just have to go on your gut feeling. We don't know for sure if we spend the money and what's the return on the investment from my perspective for the taxpayer. And I just, based on the conversation that we had last meeting, I think there were some findings in the soil, as I recall, that indicate there's a great possibility that we could end up with an elephant that we can't eat in the room. So I'd assume not to bring the elephant in the room and let somebody else deal with that.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Can we?
I'm sorry, Mr. Black?
I just have a couple of questions. If the county were to take this building over, what would it exactly be used for? I guess that's...
That would be what the board would need to decide, I would think would be if you just want to get the property to then put it up for sale, Mr. Emmer's probably indicated not being in the chain of title is probably better. If you have a need for the facility, and we've outlined the work that needs to be done there, regardless of whether there's any soil contamination, it's not a need that the fire department or the rescue squad needs. We run rescue calls today out of Frog Level Fire Department. The second floor is our quarters, our day room, our sleeping quarters, our kitchen. Everything is already in Frog Level Fire, where we run active paid crews and volunteers out of. So we have no plans, and it's not in a location for storage for the fire department. They run all their offices right here in Bowling Green. So the only express use has been from the sheriff's office of some need for the facility, but I don't know if there's anybody here with none of the upper management here to talk about what that need necessarily would be. But if there's really no defined county need for the facility, and then we ultimately can get it and sell it, then that's the risk you take of getting in the chain of title with a contamination problem. So then if you think you're going to do that, you need to do the study so you don't take the property and take the so-called elephant. There are things that would happen to the organization if they want to sell it. Being a nonprofit, there's only certain things they're going to be able to do with that funds if they were to sell the property.
So I guess my question is this. This is, I mean, this building is, I saw about $250,000. Is that with the property?
That's the assessed value on the books.
I mean, I guess my question is, what's the harm to do this? If we do the study and find out it's badly contaminated, we can still walk away, correct?
Your harm would be $6,000.
No harm.
$6,000.
But if you don't do it and you give it away, then you've given away $200,000.
Well, I mean, I just think it's a minimal risk, or they're giving it to us.
Yeah, nothing's free.
But now the
smart
building
enough to know-
again
I'm
actually
smart enough to
belongs
know that it's
to
not
the
free.
Frog Level Rescue Squad.
Correct.
Which is basically defunct because they didn't have enough members to be chartered.
But they still have an
They still own the
organization.
building. As long as they're a corporation or some legal entity, they can own the real estate. They could own the real estate forever as long as they continue to be that entity. They simply can't run calls because they're
Right,
not licensed by the county.
They're not recognized by the state to run calls.
They probably would start paying taxes on it. They probably would no longer be tax exempt because they're not doing anything, but I don't know enough facts to tell you that for a fact. But if they sell the property, then generally speaking, under the way the IRS regulations would read and would probably be in their charter, but I don't know that for a fact either, they would have to dispose of the money to a similar organization, which could mean that they could give it to another squad, volunteer squad, or they could give it to the county because it operates some. They can't just divide up the money amongst whoever's left. It has to go to another tax exempt organization.
And they're willing to donate it to the county. So I mean, it's a minimal risk, again, that's what I said before, of $6,000, and we can $5,600. We can walk away, but we at least, we confirm one way or the other. You know,
I guess, and that's been my whole point all the time. I don't, if they're willing to give it to the county, and I'm not saying we need to take it, but I would be willing to spend $6,000 versus giving away or not accepting a $250,000 building.
and will the result of this be what the remediation is?
Mr. Shebel, would they give us the remediation?
Would they
methods?
create a remediation plan as part of this?
Once the report's done, it has to be submitted to the EQ. Once the findings are there, it deems.
Once the study has been done, if it's deemed that there is a site that needs to be cleaned, the report does have to be filed to DEQ to let them know of the findings. And then DEQ, along with whoever the owner was that was going to clean that up, would have to work out a remediation plan that would be approved by DEQ. And that's when really you could figure out what that budget's going to be.
So they could find out that there's a problem. We're going to say the problem's too big for us to be involved in, and then the frog level rescue squad is going to be responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars of cleanup. And they don't have any. Okay.
Are there any grants or anything out there from the state DEQ to help with that?
Superfund money.
DEQ is a little wishy-washy on this particular subject due to the fact that tanks have already been removed. If the tanks were still underground, we would have to remove the tanks, or Frog Level Rescue would have to move them, and then there would be grant funding to cover any remediation. Since the tanks have already been gone, it doesn't qualify for that grant. It's a gray area. They're not willing to give me an answer today of whether it would be covered or not, because they would have to run it up their chain of command to figure out if it's something they could approve or not, and without them knowing whether it's even a project, they don't even want to consider it till they know whether there's an issue or not. So I don't have affirmative yes or no answer on that.
What happens if everything goes as we've talked about? There's contaminated soil there, DEQ gets involved, and they say, okay, and Caroline County says, no, we don't want the property after we found out it's going to cost us several $100,000. It stays with Frog Level Volunteer. They are defunct, if you will. What happens then?
I mean, there's nobody there that was able to pay for that, so I don't know what that ramification would be that time. You know, the state more than likely would have to end up figuring out how they're going to do it anyhow. So
State will probably end up having to clean it up themselves anyway.
Right, and they'd probably use the grant funding to be able to do that. But they won't give me an answer until we know whether the soil is contaminated or not.
It's probably worth $6,000.
Okay, so how does the board wish to address this? I see both sides of the issue, but we have to make a decision.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we at least invest in the environmental site assessment for the value of $5,600. I think that is a good faith effort on behalf of the county to make sure this site is actually clean. We're not going to have anything to do with the cleanup, but it would at least benefit the neighborhood to know there is an issue. And if it's not an issue, then the county has the option of turning the building over or selling the building. So that's the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved and probably second that we invest the necessary funds to see if there are issues within the building or the soil.
One question.
Okay, question?
Mr. Emerson, do we have any additional exposure in finding this out?
No, as long as you're not in the chain of title, you should not have any exposure just because you had the permission of the owner to have have the study done and have the test done.
That's a good, do we have written permission from the owner to do this? Can we defer this until we get some sort of written something so that we're not trespassing, finding out, and doing something we shouldn't?
Why don't we proceed on the understanding that Mr. Sheba will get written permission from the owner?
Yeah, we won't proceed until we...
Can I amend your motion that we...
No, you can never amend my motion. What we can do is say that we are going to proceed, and I will amend my motion to direct staff to ensure that we have permission from the owner.
Written permission.
Written permission from the owner to allow us to proceed.
Mr. Thompson, not to exceed $5,600?
Of course.
Okay, do you amend your second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and properly second that we would proceed, given the fact that we get written permission from the owner, giving us permission to
Mr.
sign
Emerson
that.
will write that permission slip for us.
All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 5-1. Okay. That takes us to agenda item number 9, lease agreement with Virginia Department of General Services for Virginia Health Department offices at Community Services Center.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we've been battling, for lack of a better word, this lease renewal with basically the health department. They used to do their own leases, and then it was taken over a few years ago by the Department of General Services. We actually brought a lease to you that we had done with the health department and both the dental clinic when they split up, and Central Virginia took over the dental clinic, and sent that to the health department after you all had approved it, and they just sort of sat on it, and finally General Services showed up and said, well, they can't agree to a lease, we have to. And so we've worked on a number of issues, and they wanted less square footage, and so we'll be leasing them less square footage. And so we kind of had agreement on where they would be and where the dental clinic would be, and then they sent us a, how many page lease? 40 or 50 page lease agreement that Mr. Emerson worked on, and I basically said, why don't we just modify the lease we had done with them in the past, and the one you had approved in the fall of 2013, and so we sent that back, and that wasn't good enough, and so we've sort of, we've never really gotten agreement. I think they're down to 35 pages. We've included both leases in your packet. The main difference is they want a 10-year lease with no increase in rent, and I mean, and they want to base it off of what they've been paying now, which hadn't been, that amount hadn't changed in a number of years. We had increased the rent in that one we did in 13 per square foot. So you have two options. I guess we can adopt their language and move forward, or we can adopt the lease that Mr. Emerson and the staff has put forth that we thought we'd agreed to, and send that to them and see what they do. And if they don't take anything, then I think they would stay month to month at their current rate, year to year.
It actually is it would normally be month to month if that lease had just ended, but in looking back at the original lease, which is really old, I've forgotten now, 2005 or 2001, anyway, it's really old. It had an annual renewal, automatic renewal clause in it. So if whatever the notice period, if you don't give notice during the notice period that you want to terminate the lease, and either side can do that, then it automatically renews for another 1 year. So it would actually continue if you didn't sign a new lease, and if neither side gave notice that they were going to terminate it and vacate the premises, then it would just continue year to year under the terms of that lease. And you could give them notice of we're increasing the rent as of, if before the notice period ends for terminating the lease for the succeeding year, you could give them notice of a rent increase to be effective in that succeeding year, because it would give them time to terminate if they wanted to. And if they didn't, then the rent increase would be effective for that coming year. And I think that the term of that lease is in August. I think it's August 31, if I remember correctly, when it terminates each year.
Do they pay their own electricity? I know it's a separate function of the building, so they pay their own electricity and...
We pay that, and then they
Heating.
we bill them for all these things. And that's some of the convoluted, if you go to page 2 of operating expenses, their agreement is more convoluted than what we had put forth. And because we're doing shared space in the building, the dental clinic's in there, we're going to be in there with 4 rooms that they no longer want to rent. We're going to build a wall with an emergency exit, and we'll have 4 rooms for storage of some things that's desperately needed. We've got square footage basis for those things, so we take the bill and divide everything back.
A pro rata, basically a pro rata, which is a fairly simple way to do it, and we probably spent a half a page or so to describe how that would happen. The lease that came from the state has 4 pages on how to divide up operating expenses, gives them the right to audit what you do, and you have to pay a penalty if you're off by a certain percentage. I mean, it would be a great lease if you're leasing a couple of floors in the Bank of America building or something, but for 4,000 square feet in Caroline County, it's a little overdone, in my opinion. I mean, we could go through and try to cut some more out of it and make it more reasonable and see what they say.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'm going to make a motion that we send them the county lease and ask them if they would like to sign it. If not, have a nice day.
Second.
So moved and properly second that we would send them the county lease, and it would then be up to them to determine if they want to continue renting the space. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, that takes us to agenda item number 10. And this is a possible amendment of ordinance to prohibit the keeping of dangerous, wild, exotic, or vicious animals. And my understanding here, this agenda item is in reference to a landowner who has several primates, I believe, and did not have a problem until we did the ordinance on wild and exotic animals, but since we have, excuse me, okay, since we passed the ordinance, there has been an issue, and I believe the owner has talked to you, Mr. Akers, if you would like to.
They have, and let me say that the owner of these primates contacted me a couple of weeks ago, and she did not, first of all, know about the exotic animal ordinance that was in place, and through the circumstances, the Sheriff's Department found out about them and has now given her until November the 30th to remove them from Caroline County. The board has, it's been placed before each board member, a packet, and inside that packet there's a letter from Dr. Hayes as well as her superior with the Food and Drug Administration, is it? Yeah, the Food and Drug Administration, as well as pictures of the primates and the holding pens of the primates. As Mrs. Hayes had explained to me, these primates are small, and they weigh approximately 6 pounds. Several of them do. 2 of them, I believe, she indicated weighed 8 pounds. She has had these primates for many, many, many years. I believe, I'm correct, Mrs. Hayes, you said about 16 years on some of them. So I don't believe when the board approved the exotic animal ordinance that it was our intent to deal with animals such as this. You know, I don't know if we can go back and amend the ordinance to put a weight restriction or a size restriction or a type of exotic animal, but I just don't believe that we thought in terms of these were the type of dangerous animals that we were trying to protect the citizens of Caroline County from. And so I asked Mrs. Hayes Well, she asked for my help, and all I could do is come to this board and see if the board would be agreeable to amend the ordinance based on what the attorneys say we can do to give her relief with the primates that she has had for a number of years. And that's why we're here. Mrs. Hayes is here. I'd like, if the board, if you would allow, Mr. Chairman, for her to come and explain as to what these primates mean to her and how long she's had them. And
Yeah. Dr. Hayes, you may come forward at this time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. As my primates, I own 6 of them. One of them is a Vervex. She's my largest one. She weighs about anywhere between 8 to 10 pounds. Then I own 3 brown lemurs. They basically weigh about 5 pounds. And then I have 2 capuchins. So they range in age from 1.5 to 17 years old. My Vervex is 15. My oldest brown lemur is 17. And his 2 half-sisters are 4 years old. My capuchins are the youngest ones. My primates have they've been with me ever since they was infants. I basically bottle raised them. They came from our approved breeding facility that's inspected. It's been approved by the agriculture department. I'm not a breeder. I'm not an exhibitor. Basically, my animals are my kids. I always had a love for primates ever since I was in high school. My primates, they don't come out with the public. I'm the caretaker of them, so they only with me. They in the house. As you have a picture of the building I built for them, it's got an alarm system on, which actually caused a problem with the animal control people. When my alarm went off, it was a false alarm, and the sheriff department noticed the animals there and had the animal control come out. They have no interaction with people. They've never gotten loose in the public. They're not aggressive. Basically, they meet the 3 exemption criteria that you have. The first one is they won't do any damage to the ecology. First of all, they won't get released. And they're very warm-blooded animals, so if they get out in Virginia, they're not going to survive. Don't have the right food for them, so they can't do that, and they won't breed, and so they're not going to end up being breeding and have animals that's going to be dangerous to the environment. Basically, the care for them is no different than taking care of a dog or a cat because they're small. When I have to take them to my vet, I have a vet that specializes in exotics. I can put them in a dog carrier case and take them to the vet. They can't open it up. They don't open up the locks on their cages. So the likelihood of them ever escaping is slim to nothing. The other thing is that, number B, that's not going to be a problem either. So basically, they meet all the criteria that's for the exemption. So I would like you to be able to grandfather my animals in, or give me an exemption so they can stay with me. Basically, I won't get any more primates. They will live with me until they die or I die, whichever comes first. So that's basically why I'm in front of you today. And if you have any questions,
Okay, I guess, board members first. Board members have questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one of Mr. Emerson, if you would allow me.
Certainly.
Can we put an exemption in to the current ordinance that would be dealing with the size or the weight or the type of exotic animal?
You can amend the ordinance in any way that you choose to amend it. But the only way you can amend the ordinance would either be through the normal public hearing process.
I understand that.
Or possibly through an emergency, if you found an emergency to exist.
Well, the emergency would be she's been given until the 30th of November to remove the animals from Caroline County. And I'm not sure that we can process a public hearing and all of those type of things. I'm sorry?
We can do an emergency ordinance.
Yeah, I think if we could do an emergency ordinance, then that may be some way to assist her and help her with the issue.
I mean, I don't know how to write it in.
I'm not hearing the conversation.
I think, I was just thinking that maybe you could come back on the 24th with the wording and adopt that emergency ordinance. It might be tough to adopt that tonight without.
Yeah, that'll be fine, 'cause she
It
has
would still be before
till
the
the 30th.
30th, but I think some thought would need to go into
That's fine.
what text needs to be brought forward.
And then you could convey to the sheriff who's given her that November 30th deadline that you're working on an ordinance and he shouldn't pursue it anymore, or ask him not to pursue it anymore, because you're working on an ordinance that may get passed on the 24th.
Well, he wasn't going to do anything until the 30th anyway.
Yeah, but just courtesy to let him know you're working
We
on
can
something
do-
ahead of time.
We can do that.
There is also.
He's going to know because
there
Scott's
is-
here.
Well,
I had
have
spoken to-
y'all
I-
considered grandfathered in? Because I know some counties have put the grandfather clause in for people that had
I think there may be
animals
some others.
before the law
There's
passed.
grandfathering is a zoning principle. This is a public safety ordinance. It would be like grandfathering somebody to speed down the highway or something. I mean, it doesn't, it's a non sequitur. There are exemption criteria in the statute that,
Yeah,
but the
A, B, and
animal
C.
control officer has to make the decision on those.
I think that's
So
the issue, is the fact that I'm not sure anybody's is willing to make the decision as to whether it meets those exemptions or not, so I
Well,
think it
according
needs to
to
be
my
clarified.
my vet, she feels that they meet the exemptions, but I don't know, would that hold weight, or does it have to come from the animal control people?
I guess, now, this is just my concern. I don't have a concern about these animals, personally. They look like they're fine, and I don't think they're dangerous. But the concern that I have is, can we find a way to do this without creating an issue for other animals that fall under that category? This has nothing to do with you, Dr. Hayes, but if we, just let's say and I don't think we can grandfather it anyway, but if we could, then what would stop the tigers and lions and things from coming in asking for the same thing?
Mr. Chairman, I guess my only concern, I understand where the applicant is coming from. I guess my concern is the ordinance that we passed, what was it, back in
June 9th.
2 months ago? Did not that person have monkeys as well?
No, they had lions, I think.
They had a mountain lion.
They had mountain lions.
Mountain lions.
Did they have, I know, I understand they had mountain lions, but they did not have,
I don't believe, this was the state ordinance that we adopted as it was written, and we didn't, at the time, I didn't
Right.
even consider, but I know of a family that has primates, they don't live here, their parents do, and if they were to inherit them, they said they couldn't stay here because they couldn't take the 2 monkeys, so,
What's the life expectancy of these? Dr. Hayes,
They range from 20 to 25 years.
20 to 25. One of them 17 now? And
Yeah, Coco is 17, and the Vervex, which is my largest, she's 15. And she actually had major surgery last year. She developed endometriosis, and I had to find a special vet to be able to surgically remove the adhered uterus and save her life.
So it's not like you got a dog and in 10 years it'll probably be old or something.
Well,
So, they
Coco
gotta-
and Xena is up in age. They my geriatric. So they on a special diet because of the age and the health problems they've had.
I think you should just go ahead and do the emergency ordinance.
Okay. A motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we have staff to develop an emergency ordinance to amend the exotic animal ordinance that we passed a couple of months ago.
second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would do an emergency ordinance regarding the exotic animal ordinance that we passed a couple of months ago. All in favor, let
Mr.
it...
Chairman, can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher, on the previous situation, I'm just kind of curious, on the previous situation that we had with, I know that we had the mountain lions and so forth, were there monkeys at that facility?
There were some spider monkeys.
But I mean,
The spider monkey's much bigger than mine, and they actually
How
can be
big is
very
a
aggressive.
how big is a spider monkey?
They're very aggressive.
12 pounds, 14 pounds?
Spider monkeys can get to be about 15 pounds, and they're much longer and larger. And when they get a little bit older, they tend to get a little aggressive. My primates are not very aggressive.
Speak for yourself.
Well, no, but even if they did have monkeys, under the amended ordinance, if we include primates and monkeys, they can bring them back in if they just want to bring the monkeys back in. But they didn't want the lions and the lynx and all of those mountain lions. That was what we were opposed to and we had an issue with. They can, if they want to move back to Carolina.
And they want to
if
bring
they've already
spider
moved in,
monkeys.
They can move them. I mean, they can bring them back.
The sheriff's office position is you're the governing body. Whatever you decide to do with the ordinance, we're going to enforce it as you see fit.
Understand.
Can we write in the ordinance that if they get out, I'm assuming yours have never got out, like you said?
No, they've never got
The
out.
other case, they did get out.
No.
No,
Yeah.
they never got out.
I don't think they ever got it.
Somebody said they saw them walking.
But they
They
were
were walking a
walking.
mountain lion.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're walking a mountain lion.
Can we,
Yeah.
can we put in the ordinance that if your whatever pet animal gets out for 2 times, then you lose your right? Anybody can have 1 time, but if you constantly have, I mean, wild animals are just that, wild animals. So if they get out once, that's a mistake. If they get out twice, that's the start of a bad habit, and I don't want to be responsible for them getting out twice. I don't have a problem with them having them, but if Dr. Hayes' monkeys get out and run through the neighborhood 1 time, that's an accident. If it becomes a regular thing, that's a problem.
Well, I can tell you, my guys would never be running down a neighborhood.
Right.
But we could get into the specifics of the ordinance
wouldn't see them.
as it's being written. But right now, we just need to
But I'm saying,
approve
in the
emergency.
emergency,
we
when
need
we
a
start
little
talking
more
about the
time.
emergency, that should be part of it.
We actually need to know a little bit more about what you want to exempt. I mean, you want to exempt all primates? I mean, that would include, I mean, I'm
Gorillas?
not an animal.
Gorillas?
Or the aggressive spider monkeys, or, I mean,
Weight limit
how?
like 25 pounds?
Being part of the primate community, most people will own a chimp if they can afford them. They're about $50,000. But most people will basically own a small capuchin, a vervax, a macaque, the rhesus monkey, which male can get to be 25 pounds, or spider monkeys. But right now, the biggest pet primates is the capuchins and the vervax. Not many people get spider monkeys because when they get to be about 2 or 3 years old, they can get a little aggressive.
I mean, you could do it by the name of the particular type of,
With some of the
Monkey?
acts of
don't wanna name 4,000.
animals for companion animals, rhesus monkeys are one of the ones that are used. What I don't want to get is somebody comes here, ends up with a rhesus monkey as their companion animal, and we're sitting here looking at somebody with that.
Yeah,
I'm
actually-
just looking, just so that we don't, every 6 months, we're not back here with the same thing.
Oh, I
So
understand.
if we can open it up, I mean, I'm not saying somebody should own an orangutan or
Or you can't
or-
buy orangutans as pets.
I know you-
The biggest primate someone can buy will be the chimp.
chimpanzee.
yeah, I think service animals, though, at the way they're defined at this point, doesn't include the rhesus monkey anyway.
The
So it would be.
the capuchins can be a
illegal
service
under the
monkey.
ordinance
Right,
the
and
way
that's
it
why I'm
exists.
saying, I don't want to be back here with somebody. Can we open up the aperture enough to go?
We can try, but you're going to need somebody that knows more about animals than I do.
I think Dr. Hayes could give you some information.
I was going to say, if you want me to help you, I'm very willing
Because
to
I
help.
think rhesus monkeys are one of the ones that are being looked at for companions. And what I don't want is somebody in front of us with a rhesus monkey going, I moved here, I'm disabled, and this is my companion animal, and then by our ordinance, they couldn't own it.
I've never heard of rhesus monkeys being companion. I actually used to own a rhesus monkey. I love them very dearly, but my vet, after mine passed away, my vet said, don't get another one because rhesus monkeys, you have to worry about herpes B virus. And a lot of people don't know the breeder that they're getting from and don't know if it's got herpes B, and herpes B can be very fatal to humans if they get it because they develop encephalitis. So, rhesus monkeys,
Dr. Hayes, if you would be willing to work along with our staff
I
and
certainly will.
help us to maybe come up with 'cause we want to help your circumstance,
Thank you very
but
much.
we don't want to create an additional problem
I understand
in so
that.
doing. Okay.
Yeah, I understand that. I greatly appreciate y'all wanting to help me out, and I will work with your staff.
Okay. All right, so let's vote on the motion. All in favor of the emergency ordinance going forth as moved, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 4 ayes and 1 nay, and Mr. Thomas was not here to vote. He may cast his vote when he comes back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. That takes us to special exception, excuse me. That takes us to special exception 02-2015 Clark's Cut 2 LLC, authorization to advise for public hearing. Mr. Fincham, do you have anything to say about this, or do we just need to advertise a public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, the board has currently advertised this public hearing for the January meeting. The applicant has come back, and this item was placed back on the agenda, recognizing their request to move forward with the public hearing in December.
Okay. The only thing that I would add is he has been kept from operating his business for a number of months, and now he has gotten all that cleared up. The legal process has taken, and he wants to move ahead. So I will entertain a motion to advertise special exception 02-2015 for public hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we will...
Discussion on the motion, please.
Okay.
I guess my concern is we deferred it to January, and now we're deferring it back. I didn't realize that people got a chance to when they pick their public hearing. I mean, we already gave this gentleman a deferral to January. Now we're going to go back and do it in November, and the timing seems a little curious. But I mean, that's my take on the whole situation.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, and the other thing, he hasn't been held up. He's had access to that property for 2 years to do something. It's not just a recent opportunity that he's had.
Okay. It's been moved and properly second that we advertise special exception 02-2015 for public hearing. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. And this is for December. Mr. Thomas, how do you vote?
I voted aye.
Mr. Black?
Nay.
Mr. Underwood?
Aye.
Mr. Akers?
Aye.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
And I vote aye as well. That takes us to new business. Proposed amendment to Solid Waste Convenience Site Standards Operating Procedures Manual.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Your first new business item tonight is the proposed amendments to the solid waste manual, and I've got it broken down into 3 different sections. One is the consideration of construction debris. Currently, we do not accept construction debris at the convenience sites. We do accept small renovation from homeowners in very small amounts. However, we do not accept construction debris from contractors. We do accept household-type trash from the actual businesses, small businesses, and the contractors fall into that so they can dispose of household-type trash, office trash, things of that, but not construction debris. This has been an item that we get quite a few complaints on, as well as some of the board members. So we put together a proposal that would allow us to be able to put a container at the Bowling Green convenience site. At that point, we would be able to accept, the contractors would come through, they would be weighed, and being able to provide us with a bill of lading of what they're disposing of. So we would have where it came from, what they're disposing of, and it would be able to be put into a container that we would then haul to the waste management facility and disposed of there. With that, we do have a list of items that we would accept. Doesn't necessarily cover everything, but gives you an idea of the items that we would be able to accept. And then on the second part is basically the materials that we would not accept. Those materials specifically are friable asbestos, materials containing lead-based paints, paint cans and drums that are not emptied or opened, oversized items, as well as railroad ties and treated lumber that's treated with creosote. That's a whole different hazard class, and actually is a hazardous material that we can't accept at all for those. So with that, staff looked at how we would do this. Typically, it's going to cost between $300 and $400 for a contractor to have a roll-off container delivered to a construction site to be able to facilitate the disposal of their items. Some of our small contractors that go in and replace a few windows or a screen door or porch screening and things of that sort, it doesn't really make sense for them to spend $400 for a very small amount of trash, construction debris. So with that, we've looked at that. We have determined that round-trip cost for us would be $29.24 to operate the truck, pay the driver the fuel mileage, repair and maintenance, the replacement of the vehicle. On top of that would be the $31.50 for our tipping fee. Came to a total of $60.74. We'd recommend that the board would set a fee of $65 to make sure we cover all of our expenses if fuel prices go up and down without us having to come back. And that would basically allow us to cover all of our expenses to be able to do that. We would also have a bill of lading knowing where that material came from. And if it were to be rejected by the landfill when it showed up because of asbestos or lead-based paint, we would then have a bill of lading describing the items that were dropped off. And at that point, we'd be able to call the EPA, and they would, at that point, be able to handle that for illegal dumping. The contractors do have to have certain licenses as they're doing this kind of work and being able to dispose of this type of material. So this would be somebody that would come in, that would have a contractor's license and a business within Caroline County, and all the waste would be generated within Caroline County. So it would be helping our small businesses here and our small contractors. Mr. Chairman, if you would like, I could go through the other two items, or we can address these one at a time.
You can go ahead through the other two.
Okay. Second item that we have is extending the convenience site hours. As you're aware, we've had quite a few complaints of litter along the roads. Been some discussion about hours, and the board had asked us to come back with some recommendations. The largest complaint that we received today is the hours on Saturday. We get a lot of complaints about the convenience sites not opening until 9 o'clock on Saturday. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday we open at 7 a.m. The second largest complaint is the evening hours on that, followed by our Sunday hours, followed by Wednesday hours. When we first closed on Wednesdays, that was by far the greatest complaint that we had. Everyone's pretty much used to Wednesdays. From that standpoint, we do have from time to time somebody call and say, hey, I'm at the site and it's closed and it's Wednesday, and guess what? We don't have a site that's open. So one of the things that we looked at doing is, one, recommending that we open the sites from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to go from our 9 to 5 to 7 to 7. That would cost an estimated $16,273.92 to open all of the convenience sites from 7 to 7. The second thing that we looked at was the Wednesday hours of just opening the Bowling Green convenience site only. It's centrally located. It's also the site where we take more materials. We accept contractors, local businesses that have tires to be able to dispose of it. We take brush and those type of items, and this would also allow for us to have those abilities to be able to accept the construction debris. To be able to do that, we're looking just to open the Bowling Green site for a year of $6,102.72. And the last thing we'd like the board to consider on the extent of operations is actually closing the sites some additional holidays. Currently, we're closed Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. When we looked at what other localities are doing for holidays, they're actually closed a lot more than we are. So we would recommend that we close New Year's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, and half a day on Christmas Eve. That would produce a savings of $4,224.92. So if we were to reduce and close on those major holidays, open on Saturdays from 7 to 7, and open just the Bowling Green site from 7 to 7 on Wednesdays, it would be an additional $18,151.68 to pay staff. The next item is number 3, is the installation of a retaining wall at the Bowling Green site. This is one of the items that we have a lot of complaints on when it comes to being able to dispose of items. Somebody comes in and has a large item, and we've got very tall, 8-foot, 40-yard containers, and trying to put items into those boxes are extremely hard. We have the only site that we currently can do that at is the current Bowling Green site. We do have additional property that we purchased at the Ladysmith site to be able to do that, and we've got a full set of renovations to hopefully do that in the future. We've been asking for that in the CIP. Hopefully that'll be able to be done in the near future. But the Bowling Green site is the easiest site to be able to do that. It is centrally located. It is next to a paved area where we'd be able to excavate down, pour a pad underneath and a retaining wall to hold the soil back, and then the wall would extend up about 3.5 feet so that it would catch you about just below waist, above the knee but below the waist, so you could easily remove something from a pickup truck and put it into a container without having to go over your head. Right now, we do allow citizens to place stuff on the ground so that if they're too heavy or can't pick them up, if you get a big sofa, we've got a truck that can pick that stuff up. But we do try to get as much in the containers as we can as people are dropping it off, but it's still extremely hard. That would allow us to be able to put 4 containers down there. We currently accept non-asbestos shingles. This would allow us a place to be able to put our large open-top containers down there, as well as the construction debris containers. So it would give us an area to put all of that, along with our metal recycling that we put right into containers. That expense is estimated to cost $70,000. So with that, I would like to discuss with the board each of these options and like to move forward with as the board wishes.
Okay, did you give in, you were saying that if we open on Wednesdays from 7 to 7, that would be the Bowling Green site only?
That's correct.
All right. I'm wondering and I don't know if this would work or not, but I think you're going to still have complaints from the other areas, because I just don't think people are going to want to drive from Port Royal to Bowling Green or from Ladysmith to Bowling Green. Did you give any thought to maybe opening all the sites on Wednesday, but instead of 7 hours, maybe a shorter period, maybe 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever? That way each site would be open on Wednesday. It would be better than them not opening at all. I don't know. I mean, I don't think opening on Wednesday from 7 to 7 in Bowling Green is going to solve the problem.
Right. I did compute what it would cost so the board would have the information. If you wanted to open, let's say, 4 hours on a Wednesday, it would cost $16,273. If you wanted to open the sites all day on Wednesday, all the sites, it would cost you $48,821.
So what are we paying to open the site from 7 to 7 on Wednesday?
One site?
Yeah, just one.
Or all the sites?
Just Bowling Green.
Just the Bowling Green site, $6,102.72.
And to open all of them for 4 hours.
To open them all for 4 hours on Wednesday, $16,273.92.
I guess my thing is, I just don't believe opening them from 7 to 7 on Wednesday in Bowling Green is going to solve the problem.
Mr. Chairman, my concern is the fact that you indicated that the Bowling Green site was centrally located. And my question is, to who? It certainly is not to the people in Ladysmith, and it's certainly not to the people in Carmel Church, and it's certainly not to people over in Western Caroline. You know, I guess my point is the fact that the western side of the county, just say west of 95, it comprises of a little more than a third of the people in Caroline County. There are approximately 10 to 11,000 people in that general area, and that's just the Madison and Western Caroline districts. It doesn't include the the Reedy Church district or the Mapplenai district. Mr. Thomas now comes up to Green Road, where in fact the convenience site in Ladysmith is in Mr. Thomas's district. So I don't see that centrally located. And I can tell you, it appears to me that with at least 11 to 12,000 of the Caroline County residents, living in the western part of the county, that may be the place to open the site on Wednesday rather than the Bowling Green site, because it's certainly not centrally located to the people in Rita Church District or anywhere. Mr. Underwood's district comes right up within 2 miles of Ladysmith.
Yeah, the numbers from the solid waste that we dispose of show that centrally located was centrally located in Caroline County, so a resident in Port Royal wouldn't have to travel to Ladysmith. However, in saying that, 52% of our trash is generated at the Ladysmith site. We operate 7 convenience sites. The other 6 sites together do not equal what Ladysmith does all by itself.
Absolutely. And that's my point, and the fact is, that road that the Ladysmith site is on is a very crooked road and narrow road. I have been there when traffic has been backed up into the curve there and even beyond the curve.
Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock.
I don't know when it'll happen. I'm not sure when it will happen, but I'm sure that at some point there's going to be a horrific accident there that is not going to be good. If we're going to open Bowling Green, I think we should at least give the people on the western side of the county an opportunity to have open on Wednesday as well. And you'll cut down on some of those backups that you see at different times. That's my take on the convenience site opening.
How does the board feel about opening all of them for 4 hours each on Wednesday?
I don't think the 4 hours is, see, and that's part of my problem with Mr. Schiebel's comparison to other localities, is a lot of people in Caroline get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drive to Northern Virginia, wherever, and they don't get back home until 7 or 8. So whatever 4-hour time frame you have, I missed that because I'm on 95 stuck in traffic. So you either open them all up to normal time, or I know we did this as a cost-saving measure originally. And we picked a day that was the least used day, which was Wednesday. I don't necessarily think one day opening is going to affect the trash and litter we're seeing. I think that's a different problem. So for me, from a cost-saving stance, I would say let's hold off on the Wednesday opening for a while, but the Saturday extended hours are really a good idea, and we need to go with that. And the holiday schedule, again, I'm going to go along with comparing us to other places. We need to be open on Memorial Day and 4th of July and Labor Day, because there's a lot of hot dog bun bags and stuff that has to be thrown away those times. I don't mind you being closed on Christmas Eve. But that's kind of where I am. In the retaining wall, I think there's a site out there where we've got a 6-foot drop or whatever. We might be able to build a retaining wall for less than $70,000.
The issue that we have currently is if we open it up, that's strictly to dump shingles, which is a very small amount of people that come in there. We have had people that have slipped in there. We've had vehicles that have gotten stuck. We've got people that have gotten injured from slipping in between the container in there. And it's just not, there's no safe way to be able to protect that area without having to put concrete in there. We could lower one box down and cut that cost down by just putting one box to do that. So when we can do that, and that's probably a $20,000, $25,000 range where we could put one box down to a level so you would have one box to be able to dispose of large items at that one site. So that is possible. Ideally, it'd be nice to put it in that whole area, but again, one's better than nothing at this point.
But I mean, $70,000 to me is a lot of money. And if I got to pick, I'm going to probably buy 2 sheriff cars or 2 school teachers or fire and rescue people, whoever, before I build a $70,000 spot for me to dump trash. And I wish you'd have told me earlier that you provide help, because my back would have really appreciated it when I was lifting heavy stuff up there. So if we provide help, why I got to spend $70,000?
We just haven't put it right there, and we'll get a machine to pick it up. We don't want anybody else, one of our staff, to get hurt either, so we got machines that can do that for us.
So why do I need to spend $70,000 if I've already bought a machine?
Well, this is, again, we're looking at the list of construction material that's here that needs to come, and we're not talking about one, you're probably talking a number of trucks a day. And if it rains, I mean, I remember when they had the open pit, and when you backed up to it, if it had been raining, you could be stuck or you could fall in. I thought we had money in the budget for this retaining wall already. I thought that was something we approved.
No, sir.
because we have talked about this before, but at some point, we're going to have to fix something there so nobody gets hurt. If we're going to put a box in the ground, and there's a number of people just doing home stuff, taking down chimneys, taking off siding, replacing windows, and I've had a number of calls from folks, small business-wise, in the county. I mean, if we don't fix this now, we're going to have to fix it eventually. So, 70,000 today, yeah, maybe not, but do we do something? Do we build something? Can the high school kids build us in the masonry class, build us a wall?
I can ask.
I mean,
There you go.
let's see if we can't get innovative and see if we can't get the high school masonry class, because you've got the equipment to dig what they need for footings. What you need is the concrete, the block, and skill. But if we could get the high school shop class to say they could form up the footing and they could lay the block, is it a win-win for all of us if that happens?
I can do win-win-win because we've actually got somebody who's trying to start a masonry class at the high school, and they won't be able to do it for another 6 months. So maybe we can get him in here and do part of that work too.
And maybe the material cost is the material
Show off what
cost.
he can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just looking for a way that we solve this problem and in a way that helps everybody, because I know it's something we need to do, and 70,000 right now, I agree with you, is something that we'd have to look at, but if we could get students involved, somebody teaching, pour a pad, lay the block, everybody wins.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so seemingly, the extended hour on Saturday seems to be the consensus. I mean, we all agree to that. Probably no Wednesday hours anywhere right now. And if you could check with the high school or the person that Mr. Thomas knows
I think you know who I'm talking about.
about the retaining wall.
He used to own Buffalo.
Yeah. And then you could come back if you,
I'll tell you.
you know, we can go ahead and go with the extending of the hours on a Saturday. And of course, the
Closing.
What about the construction debris? We haven't, the $65 a ton. For small business, and we can set a limit of how many trips a week, a day. We've got a number of folks doing that, and it's either that or they've got to get dumpsters. And a dumpster for a small job's pointless.
I need to think about that one a little longer because construction debris, we had a long discussion about construction debris.
Yeah, but we've got a pretty concise list.
Yeah, but we also have a pretty significant population in the county who said they were definitely against any sort of construction debris. Now, this is the county doing what they're already doing, but I think we need to think about that, and I'd appreciate a little more time. I'd like to have a constituent meeting in the early part of December so we could do this December-ish.
So when do we want to start with the extended hours on Saturdays? Is that something we want to do
You
immediately?
can do that Saturday.
You got to find people
Well,
first.
yeah, well, as soon as you can. I
We
mean,
can do it January 1 if we can do it before then,
okay.
but we'll start with January 1 if that's
For
okay.
extended hours. And we talked about the holidays. We said, I believe, Christmas Eve, but not the 4th of July, and so we,
Keep the schedule the way it is and add the half a day for Christmas Eve.
yeah, okay.
And New Year's is a really slow day as well.
You're closed on New Year's.
No,
You're
sir.
not closed on New Year's.
No, we're not.
Yeah, it's probably a slow day because people can't get up.
And the other thing, the other small piece that goes along with that is, we always have a determination when it's snowing and the government office is closed. We've never really taken the stance on convenience sites being closed at the same time. But we do have an older working crew that's out there, and we do have a hazard of people getting out of vehicles and not being able to do that. So we would like to say, when the government offices are closed, they're closed as well.
Yeah. I would think that if the county closes, they're county employees. I don't know,
You want to leave it open?
I don't know why they would not come under the same,
Yeah, but it's all relative. I mean, if you think you can drive in the snow, 2 inches of snow doesn't bother you,
yeah.
and the county's closed. So I packed up all my trash in the pickup knowing I can drive in the snow, and I get there and the gate's closed. I'm not going to be happy.
Well, I won't be.
I don't have a pickup, but that's another story. But the reality is, I think you should use your own judgment when to
Yeah.
close it, and you've got the Caroline Alert System. you blast out an alert that says the convenience sites will be closing in 1 hour due to snow. Something like that.
Sounds good.
Okay. So you
Thank
have
you.
what you need? Okay.
Yes, sir. Saturday hours starting January 1?
January 1. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that takes us to the proposed amendment to memorandum of understanding with schools for the use of former C.T. Smith School. Is that,
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We've been working on this for a while, and we included in your packet, we basically amended the agreement we currently have and are proposing to the schools, and they had agreed when we met with them to move our space around. Currently, we were in space on the eastern side, and part of that space they had sort of sublet up from underneath of us to a daycare. So we would, the newest space is on the west side, and they were currently using that for storage and have agreed to move their storage to the east side in the older rooms and let us have the newer rooms for programming. So we basically want, as you see on the drawing, the front of the building and all the way to the west side. And some of that we don't really have any programming need for, but
I didn't see a drawing.
yeah, I don't have a drawing.
I was looking for one and didn't see one, so,
It's not a drawing in.
oh, it's in, okay, so it's not in the board packet.
where is it?
It's on the table.
Oh, okay.
Because I was trying to figure out which was which.
It's outlined in red.
So does the gym become ours?
We were using the gym
Yeah.
currently. I think that's what we proposed. I gotta change my browser settings. I can't read mine right.
Everything in red, right?
Yes, sir. We would give up basically the space that we're currently using in the auditorium to have more of exclusive use of the gym and let them rent out to the theater group that's using
Is that the cafeteria
the
area?
cafeteria area. That would give us a public meeting room space in the library. We'd give the sheriff's office space in the old office and adjoining office. Some of the front rooms just down the hall to the west from that we really don't have any use for right now, but it would sort of be in our space. We mainly want to use the new rooms on the far west side of the drawing, which are the newest classrooms built. Those rooms in the gym, and then the public meeting room in the library. And so there would be some spare spaces there for either storage or other programming if, some other Parks and Rec programs, grew.
Mr. Cullen, did you say that the sheriff's area would still stay where it's at?
No, they would move in the office space, which is sort of where you go in the front door, and we would prefer
The old
principal's office
Yeah,
and an
okay.
adjoining office next to that.
Yep, okay, good,
And that way we could vacate the old building.
yes.
Okay, we need a motion to approve, or are there other questions?
Now, have we been able to, you're satisfied as far as the track area, as far as the ball area, baseball area, as well as the basketball courts, all the things that we plan to upgrade and,
We felt that we should at least get 5 years or more out of it if they decided they needed to do a school there. The wording is in 7, the effect on county park improvements to the building reopen as a school. Should the school board decide to reuse the building or property in the future as an active school, the county shall continue to have access to any physical improvements made to the adjacent park and school grounds during non-school hours. The school board should make no changes that impact the county's ability to utilize improvements to the adjacent park and school grounds without consulting with the board. I mean, we felt that was about as far as we could push that issue. In our discussions, they don't seem to think that they would impact that. I would worry more about the basketball court than I would the ball field and the track. I think those would stay. If they were to ever do a school, that might be that the bus loop might be right back through the basketball court again. But we're a few years away from them even starting planning for that next school. Hopefully, a couple. So by the time they would build it, maybe it'd be 5. So I would think maybe we get 5 years even out of the basketball and further out of the track and that type of thing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The only question I have is, as far as the ball fields are concerned and the grounds, are we doing the mowing in the summer, or is we
do.
We would be, okay.
We do now.
Yeah, we do now. We would propose to take over even the mowing in the front of the building and some of the maintenance around the front that they were currently doing.
Okay.
Seems how we'd be using the front of the building.
Now, also, at the bottom of the sheet here, you're indicating that action requested the Board of Supervisors discuss whether to add cost of paving the track to the improvements. Is that in this particular case, or is this...
That was already approved.
I was going to say, I thought we'd already approved that some time ago. So what is the total cost for it now?
51,000.
Project cost $36,000.
51,160?
Right.
All the improvements had previously been approved by the board. That was just put in for background information so that you remembered that.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve the proposed amendments to the memorandum of understanding with the schools for use of former C.T. Smith School.
Second. It's been moved and properly second that we would approve the proposed amendments to the memorandum of understanding with the schools for the former use of C.T. Smith Schools for cost not to exceed $51,160, I think. Right. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, that takes us to discussion of proposed rezoning text amendment to allow carryout restaurants in an M1 industrial district. Mr. Finch.
Mr. Chairman, the board just says yes to the next two. We can go on.
I'm sorry.
Nothing, just kidding. Mr. Chairman, the next item on your agenda is a request for a text amendment to allow the potential for a carry-out restaurant in the M1 district. You have a brief memo which kind of outlines the issue. Really, there are two options that the board wants to go forward. One is to allow a carry-out restaurant as a permitted use by right in the M1. The other option would be to allow it by a special exception permit in the M1 district. If the board wants to have the Planning Commission consider this, then you can refer one or both options to the Planning Commission for consideration and a recommendation to the board.
How does the board wish to act on that?
Mr. Chairman, I have a little more information. This is actually a request made by a gentleman who used to run a restaurant on Route 2, just past Stonewall Jackson, whatever burgers it was.
Yeah.
And he has since been priced out of that place by rent. And he would like to open basically a carry-out crab seafood restaurant there, and they actually did that at Pineview Deli years ago. So I guess that wasn't legal then at the time, or maybe it was legal and then not grandfathered once they stopped. But really,
It lost that status. Although it's zone B1, so you could still have a carry-out restaurant at Pineview.
yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, he's actually next door to that. And I've spoken to the neighbors, as a matter of fact, the lumberyard folks have said they would be wholeheartedly in favor of this. Really, I don't see any problem with a carry-out restaurant in a B1 M1, if there's, any real issue. It's industrial, but I still got to eat.